I did it yesterday, I don't know how to do it again today.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Well, we got through, I think, a good portion of what we're doing yesterday. Where did we end up? At 22? Does that sound right?
Well, we skipped back and forth, didn't we?
Yeah, we did a lot of skipping back and forth, so bear with me. Let's start at 22.
21.
21, fine, then we'll start at 21.
Thank you.
I will remind everyone that the microphones are actually very sensitive, so they will pick up all the comments, but they will also pick up sidebar comments, so just fair warning.
So keep your mouth
Thank you.
shut.
Fair warning.
Okay, let's start at 21 then, and who wants to take over here? So,
I'll happily get us started.
please do. Oh, just so you know, by the way, Avis is at the TAR conference giving the TREC report. So she's been moved up on the agenda. She's trying to get over here as early as she can. However, number one on the agenda, I think, is going to be a long
It's
item.
done.
It's over.
It's
Oh,
their-
it's over?
their vote.
It's already done.
So, pardon me?
It's done.
It's done?
Russell won.
Whoa, holy moly, that's fast. So she'll be here any moment, I guess.
Who won?
Russell Berry.
Russell Berry.
All right.
Wow.
So anyway, that's where Avis is, and she hopefully is on her way.
Okay. Commissioners, the materials for agenda item 21 are found in the supplemental materials that were sent to you. And they look like this. Okay, so if you'll, this is what we're looking for. Okay, it's a
Sucks.
multicolored summary in the supplemental materials for the current measures. And if we need to make more copies, all you have to do is raise your hand and we'll give you another copy. Okay?
The champions.
Yeah.
Got it. No, I got it.
Christine, would you mind making a couple more?
It looks like
Yeah.
this,
You know
guys.
what, Commissioner
Oh,
Turner?
okay, it is that, okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Turner, do you need that?
Please.
That threw me.
Yes. In the supplemental materials, they are,
What page? This up. Here we go.
yes.
Page 5.
Page 5 of the supplemental.
There we go. So page 5 through 7.
Okey doke.
Okay, does everybody have what we need? All right. And so one of the things that was very clear, one of the decision items is a management action that came out of the Sunset Commission report, was a request, a directive that the agency adopt more meaningful performance measures. And so we took that based on some guidance from you and the executive committee to basically say, we're going to go back and look at, there's a seat for you at the table. Commissioner Stevens, come on up. We're going to go back and look at all of the measures that this agency has adopted over the years, and we're also then going to look at the reports that we bring to you that provide you with the information that you need to give us good guidance. It's like, why are you measuring that? I don't think you should be measuring that. We think you should be measuring something else. And so we just started with all of the measures that are currently a part of our strategic plan. So this is a summary of those measures, and in the additional materials in your book there, I think you'll find the actual definitions of each of those. Is that in there?
Yes.
Okay. So those are the definitions. We, of course, bring you, we have several different ways to provide you information. So one is that we have monthly reports that we do internally. We call them staff reports, okay? In your quarterly business meetings, you get the most recent completed monthly set of staff reports. And then it is augmented by some special reports that we do, especially in the enforcement areas, but in a couple of other areas as well. And so we have those quarterly reports. The measures that we have tracked over the years and include every 2 years in our agency strategic plan go back to the time when we were an LAR agency, and those were essentially given to us. You need to track these things. When we became SDSI in 2011, for our 2012, and then again I think in 2014, when we did the strategic plan, the biennial strategic plan, we updated some of those. We actually eliminated some since they were no longer required for our LAR, and we tried to come up with measures that actually are useful. We had, for the first time, we added some call center or contact center statistics and measures. Anyway, those quarterly measures we used internally here. Now, there's some overlap between those. So while there was this set of quarterly measures and then this other set of monthly staff reports, there was some cross-pollination, if you will, between those two. There was some overlap. In addition, we had annual reports that are required. Some are just they're statutory requirements, and others that are specifically in our Chapter 1105 SDSI reports. Okay? As you are all well aware, the Sunset Commission basically said we need more information from you guys, and so we want you to report in the same way that 3 of the other SDSI agencies report. There's a standard set of reports along with 5 years of trend data. So every November, we want you to report what they report, which is a broader set of data than what was in our Chapter 1105 reports, which mirrored what 4 other SDSI agencies report. So we were in one camp with a modified set of reports, and we ended up in the other camp with a much broader set of reports. And that's fine. It's actually very useful to have that trend data. One of the things that you will see as we go through this is that much of that data we've already been reporting to you, and many of our monthly reports actually show year-over-year trend data. So what we're hoping to do as a part of this discussion is come to an agreement. We're going to make a proposal for certain measures and certain ways that we report things to you. If you want them more frequently or less frequently or in a different format, we just ask you to have that discussion and let us know, and that's what we'll do. Okay? So to start out with, we took our quarterly measures reports, most of which in this particular format you never saw. We did them internally, and many of the elements that are in here we report to you on the monthly report, but not everything. So we want to fix that. So anything that is recommended here to remain as a measure, you would see, this is our recommendation, you would see either as part of a monthly report So the way that you see them now, we'll track them every single month, and then provide them to you at your meetings the most complete previous month. And then, also, as we file them, this is part of our commitment we made to you back in November and December, because you wanted more information. Every time we file those reports, we will send you a link that says the most current set of monthly reports are now on our website. Okay, and we'll send that to you so you can track those along with us. So it'll be a new set. We're also recommending a new set of monthly reports. And so we'll just walk through each of these measures. And so it will say on the side under recommendations, either we report it month to month, so which means you'll see it every month. And you'll also see the most current month at your quarterly meetings. Report it quarterly, you'll see that at your quarterly meetings. Or report it annually, and we're making a recommendation that the commission adopt as a policy having a November workshop every year in conjunction with your regular November quarterly meeting, at which time all of that annual data will be finished with the last fiscal year, and we'll report to you, here's everything that happened last year compared to the previous year. And that's the opportunity for you to say, doing well, not doing so well, how can we do that better? I want to see more data. It'll also be right after we filed a 5-year summary with the SDSI report. So you'll have all of that data for that workshop in your November meetings. Yes, sir, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, Matt. Chairman Bob.
Okay, good. Yes.
Thank you. You recommended November, right? I'd like for us to discuss the November date or maybe prior to. And the reason for that is that our meetings are still going to be quarterly. And one area that I want to discuss also is how many meetings we have. And we meet quarterly, and you can see drinking from a fire hydrant every time you come down here. And that's only when we meet. Studying up to ramp up takes forever on 4 meetings. So I'm hoping that we discuss at some point in time more meetings. And also, if you are going to meet, if you all going to meet, I might not be here, but hopefully I won't. You have to do it beforehand. So at least you can not only staff tell us, we would understand it and be able to digest it, and then be able to ask the questions at another meeting. But giving us too much information at one time is not very good.
So the reason that we suggested the November meeting timeframe is that is early in November, sometime in late October is when we actually close out the prior fiscal year. So we have all that data, and then November 1st is the date that we're required to file our 5-year SDSI update reports. And so as soon as they're filed, I think that's we just want to be able, we want the time that you do spend to be very productive, so that you have all the data that you need in order to review our progress and give us direction for the future. The other thing about November, just to offer this, is that every other year, every year in November something's happening, say? Okay, in 1 year, we're getting ready for the legislative session. So last November, we're getting ready for this legislative session coming up in the odd-numbered year. The other November, we're preparing for the strategic plan. Now, that's one of the things that I got very clearly from some of the discussions with the commissioners, is that, yes, there's a lot of stuff in the strategic plan, but we see the plan for the plan in February, and then we see the draft of the plan in May, and then twice in the last 9 years, the comment has essentially been, there's not enough time to absorb that. And so let's have another meeting in either late May or early June and deal with the plan. We did this last year as well. Most recent example. And so if we back that up and say, instead of the staff working on our idea of what the strategic plan looks like in January and February, putting the listening tour together. February is when you generally approve the topics that we're gonna ask about on the online survey and the listening tour. And then bring all that back and get you a draft before the May meeting. We'll actually have those discussions, instead of in February, we'll have them in November. And I think we would all benefit from a longer lead time for strategic planning and a longer lead time for legislative planning as well. And that's why November was recommended. And also the board has adopted a policy to do the very same thing they've done for the last 3 years now.
Commissioner Stevens?
I would like to request that we don't have two-day meetings unless it's absolutely necessary. I would prefer to have one-day meeting and then come back, because I think it's everybody works, and it imposes, it can be harder for people to do that, and I think it's, at least it's for me, I can't speak for others, but it just, if it's possible, as we've had it, I don't mind coming, but if it's okay, give us information, then we can come back, even within the same month, even a week spaced out, it's okay, or 2 weeks. But I would prefer to do that instead of having 2 days.
Mr. Chair.
Or start from the very, start very early and do it all day long.
We have an agenda item 29, which talks about frequency of meetings, so we could probably address this there. This is really on performance measures, so maybe we want to get back on that track.
And if I could, let me just speak to that for half a second. I for one, because we discussed the fire hydrant thing in November, and I assume everybody has been getting all the monthly reports now. I know the reports that I'm getting have been exponentially more than what we had gotten in the past. And the whole point is to make us better informed of what's going on, so that we don't show up every quarter wondering, looking at the book for the first time. So I appreciate those reports, and they are a little bit of a, it's still a fire hydrant, but it's turned down a little bit because we're getting it in pieces. So,
well, one of the things that I hope you'll see from this recommendation is that we want to sharpen those as well. Okay, so that some of the new monthly reporting formats will exclude a lot of the extraneous data that, frankly, you guys, in many cases, have not ever asked about or commented upon or whatever. They've just been part of that body of traditional reporting that has just been carried on and on.
Tony's
and on.
report's terrific.
Chairman Bob?
Yes.
It's your question, and I also have a question.
I was just going to basically say the same thing that Bob did, that Tony's reports have really helped me, and I get those kind of reports in my company as well, and the CFO interprets stuff differently and looks at stuff, sees stuff differently, and points that out. And so if you can do it, expand a little more than what Tony's doing, it may be a lot of trouble, but instead of more meetings, that would really be nice to see that monthly.
Okay.
Chairman Bob? The reason I brought this up, because remember, what got us in trouble, and reports are great, the more the better. That's reactive. We need time to act and ask questions. And that's one reason that I recommend we have more meetings. Because if we go back and staff does, we'd be impressed how much work staff does just to prepare for our meetings. So it look like they're calm and collected, but they're like a duck swimming and the feet are real busy. I know that for a fact because I've seen it. But still, we need time to be proactive at times, and we'll discuss some other stuff as well.
I for one, that's really valuable to me is interpretation of data, like y'all's interpretation of the data, what you're seeing, because you guys deal with this stuff day in, day out. And so your perspective on what you're seeing in the data really helps me, because I can look at these numbers and they're just numbers. They're snapshots over a period of time. There's a whole human story that occurs beyond those numbers. And so understanding how and why that number is what it is really, helps me more than anything else. And with the understanding that it's your version of what happened, right? And then as, Commissioner Ariaga would say, it's time for us to ask questions after that. So that's what's very valuable to me.
Thank you, Commissioner, because that is one of the things that when staff has been working on this diligently for a while now, and trying to get that to the point where, so if we send you monthly reports, and then we send this again, the very first time you see in the meeting materials, you will have already seen that month, okay? Previously, just be re-included, as well as some of the quarterly summaries. That is so when we present those to you, the objective is to simply do exactly what Commissioner Westcott suggested, which is, I'd like you to turn to this page and notice this trend, okay? And here's what we think is going on here. And feel free to ask questions about it, rather than say, as we do today, or even did yesterday, look at the E1 report, and and we're just pointing out the numbers that are on the page to you without necessarily. I know many of the directors try to do this already, and certainly in response to your questions, to trend analyze, right? That's the most important thing, I think, for you guys. And that's why we want to give you year over year in almost every monthly report, and then of course the annual reports as well, okay? With 5 years of data. So if you'll look back at the materials, I'm happy to answer any questions before we just kind of walk down these suggestions, and if you have any questions, happy to answer those, or however you decide to foster this discussion. So the very first measure is the percentage of applicants who pass the state exam. So let me say one more thing. Many of these since 2012 have listed this state benchmark and a number. Okay. What I wanted to report to you in our research is that those were Governor Perry things, and Governor Abbott has not adopted the same benchmarks that Governor Perry has, okay? And so while we included them, regardless of what it was, if it was a benchmark that applied to a licensing agency, it was on here, because that's the way the governor wanted it. But right now, that is no longer a requirement that we put those in there every quarter. So this is one of those that, for example, we would say this is something that we would bring to you at that annual review. Here's what it looks like, the passage rate for exams for the various types, and here's how that compares to last year, and here's how this compares to national statistics. Once a year to look at that with those two benchmarks, how are we doing compared to the nation, and how are we doing compared to what we did last year, we would suggest is probably sufficient for your needs on that particular thing. The ESAC would get it whenever they wanted it. You can get it whenever you want it, but our recommendation is that at least once a year we would do a full-blown report for you on that statistic. The chair is managing the conversation.
Bob, turn around. You got hands up.
We're going to have to watch.
Well, my question is pretty simple.
Sure.
Will you create your own targets for your applicants? This 87%, you had 75, and year-to-date is 66. Will you create your own internal targets?
That's a really good question, because I think the governor set those targets before between licensing agencies or among licensing agencies. If you notice, one of the things that happened this year with Sunset is that our performance was compared to other, in some areas, compared to other SDSI agencies, but it was not with a target in mind. It was simply, here's what some of your peers are doing, and you're not up to the same standard. They're within this range, and you're a little below that, right? So it doesn't have a particular target. My suggestion would be that if this body wants to set a target, then set a target, And that's what we'll report to you, our progress against that target.
Because I think it takes you away from being a reactionary agency to be more proactive. You don't have to have the national, but to start creating something internal that you can really be measured by.
And were there other hands or comments on that particular one?
Commissioner Ariaga, did you, was it?
She goes first.
Now I have to remember as realtors, we also, as real estate brokers in the room, we also hear all this consternation going around in the circles that we run in. And for instance, on this first thing, the percent of applicants who pass the exam. Okay, I'm pleased with this and want it to go up to meet the target. At the same time, I know that there's a bunch of conversation that we hear about the first-time pass rate. If there's going to be consternation and it's going to be coming from TREC down to the real estate schools, and I happen to own one, about first-time pass rate, then we need that information coming down to TREC to say, is it real? Is it something we have to worry about? Or, guys, we all need to quit worrying about that as long as the people pass. It's the college student that, when I passed, and I got in trouble because I passed from my dad, because I didn't study, because I was used to studying. Other people aren't used to studying. So
Commissioner, I get your point there, and I think it's an appropriate comment because the statute requires us to publish first-time pass rates for each of the schools, for each of the providers, okay? And this measure is the overall pass rate, not the first-time pass rate, because generally that's what is reported nationally, okay? And so if you're gonna, and this one was originally defined that way in the Governor Perry benchmark.
And it's something that then we can answer and take the heat off of TREC if we're running in those other circles. Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
At the risk of running into rabbit holes, one of the questions we should be asking either right now or later today or later this year is our vendor. How long has Pearson you been with us?
Let's see, first 1, 2, 6. I think they're on they completed 4 years last August.
At some point in time, I'd like to hear a recommendation from staff on how well they're doing. And I remember we changed over, I never knew we changed over until it was done. Maybe I knew about it, I just didn't pay attention to it. But that's something you need to keep your ears open for. We do vendors, and they're all good guys. I guess, Pearson View, have you all ever gone to one of those sessions they do, is it annually, where they go over the questions?
Yes, Commissioner.
Outstanding. Outstanding, you have not done it.
Exam review.
Exam review. All the hard questions are made easier, or they ask, why is everybody failing? And all the easy questions are tailored to make sure they're fair. I just don't know when we evaluate the vendor, if we do.
So, and I know Commissioner Stevens was part of that most recent one last fall. So what we have done in the past is we allow every 6 years we go out, or sooner, depending on performance. But the contracts that have been let previously, there's only 2 national providers for exams. Okay, and so every time we put a proposal out there, we get 2 responses to it. And we switched 4.5 years ago now, because we had been with the same for more than 6 years. I think we were at 12 years that we had been with PSI. And the metrics, the performance metrics of both of these national providers is carefully tracked by Arella. Okay, and they have to come, anytime they make changes to their exam, they have to come to Arella. The exams have to be reviewed by an independent group of regulators that do exam development at Arello, and it becomes an Arello certified. There's only 2, as I said. And so what it really came down to was their performance with us and pricing. Because the pricing goes directly to the student. The student is the one who pays for the price for the exam. And so there was a 20% disparity in pricing last time, which was that's a real number.
Any complaints or remarks about our vendor?
The only thing, and they've been very, the only thing that we have routine issues about is capacity management. So the number of seats, how long does it take to get the seat to take the exam? And so PSI had 20 testing stations. Pearson VUE had 19 at the time. So that was pretty equivalent, about in the same places, all that. Since then, Pearson VUE has added another 30 locations contracted with colleges to provide more open seats, and developed an additional 8 here in Texas. And so I think they're at 28 total company-owned and 30, so almost 60, 30 contracted. They have another probably 80 that they could bring on that are commercial contracted ones. But we left it with the institutions, with the colleges.
Mr. Turner?
Did you have a follow-up? Okay. I have a question / point of order. We, on agenda item 21, is it our intent to go through each of these proposed changes to our reporting and talk about each one of them on agenda item 21? And
since I wasn't here to begin this, I don't know what you had registered as an intent to begin with.
We haven't gotten very far.
Okay.
that's my point. Can we talk about,
Okay.
do we want explanations on each of the changes that staff has recommended? And if so, can we let Doug provide those explanations? Or do we want to entertain questions from members on, the members or the commissioners may have on particular items here?
Yeah.
I think you can ask the questions when they come up. So people have seen this for the first time. The exec committee reviewed it, and we decided don't do it with any form. We're going to see. But it's important that you all get to see the stuff that we got to see already. And I like people asking questions because it triggers stuff that in the past we wanted to, but we forget. So that's one reason I recommend we go down the list if they want to.
So Mr. Elmixon was in the middle of giving an explanation of some of these things, and we stopped him by asking questions.
Correct.
So why don't you continue on
Okay.
slug through this?
And I'm happy to shorten each of the explanations, and then if anybody has any questions, happy to answer those. Okay.
Perfect.
So the first application you passed the exam. The board also adopted that recommendation for reporting that annually. License holders with no violations, report that to you quarterly at your meetings, and also as a part of our annual review. Eliminate the recipient, no, that's for the board, you don't have to worry about that. So the TREC number of new licenses issued, previously it was a target, and it really doesn't make sense to have a target. We're not out there trying to get more people. They just come because the market's good, right? And when the market's bad, they don't come. And right now, we could see that, we had 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, 8,000, 6,000, and we're still trending down. We're still growing, just the growth is slow, okay? So it's just a matter of reporting that trend to you as opposed to setting a target that makes no sense. And so reporting that data. So the board adopted that as well. Efficiency measures, percent of new applications submitted online. Again, you already get that report every month as a part of the I-1. I-1 report or I-2 report, one of the two. But anyway, we'll continue reporting that month to month for you. The ones in tangerine or orange or whatever that color is, tannish, orangish, are the ones that we had recommended some major change to. So these, the four at the bottom there, two for TREC, percent of new applications processed within 10 days and renewals issued within 7 days. This is another one of those areas, it's not a benchmark to have a particular target. What's more important is to report to you the actual time. How long is it taking us when we have our hands on the materials? Because if we're waiting for the applicant to send more information to us, then that time, we have to wait until we get it, and then how long does it actually take us to process it once we get it? And then adding up all of those, well, you're missing this, okay, well, let's stop the clock. Now they send that in, okay, now let's start the clock again. But adding up all that, that's something we can do something about. That's our efficiency. Are we staffed correctly to be able to handle the volume that comes in and turn it around quickly? That's what that's about.
Yes.
Commissioner, and you feel that's a trackable measure, all that starting and stopping of the clock? I mean, that seems like that's...
Yes, I do. And the,
Seems hard.
what do we call it? Not the speedometer.
App tracker.
App tracker.
So we're putting some things in place behind the scenes to be able to do that regardless of the app tracker, so that we can know what the disposition of the application is, so we can accurately track that. Because it really is what you want to know in terms of efficiency.
Right.
Not how long it takes, but how long it takes us.
Got it.
So
we've got some tech in place to do that.
we're-
Nobody's
we're
going to be
working-
manually...
We're working on
Okay,
that, yes,
good.
sir.
All
Yes,
right.
sir. It will hopefully be in place very soon, and it's going parallel with the app tracker, but it doesn't need to, it's going to be done before the app.
Got it.
So one of the processes, you get a piece of paper, or if it came in electronically, you open that up, you analyze it and do something with it. In the database itself, it says what the next step is. You click that, now we have a recordable event.
Got it.
Okay,
Got
so
it.
now we're tracking each of those events and time between events.
Got it.
If you'll flip over to page 6, total number of license holders, again, is no target, it's a report month to month. You already get that on the L1 report. Same with jurisdictional complaints, you already get those reported month to month. So the monthly reports, this is taking away the targets and just reporting the data to you. Non-jurisdictional complaints resolved within 6 months. Now, here's one of those that that still is. It's a benchmark, but it's also something that is common. It's a common point of comparison, and we saw it in Sunset. In fact, on the board side, they made a really big deal about it because the federal requirement is only for 12 months. We had an internal target of 9 months, and they said, no, you need to figure out how to get to 6 months, 180 days. And so they're working on that, and they have some significant plans. That's going to take a whole bunch of resources to make that happen.
Commissioner Turner?
They're working on it.
Mr. Oldmixon, would you please take a little bit of time to explain all of these reporting measures where we're saying no target, just data now? Commissioner Williams had a good point, and we spent several minutes talking about why we're removing targets, because he does have a good point that then how do you measure? And I remember I felt the way he did, and then you were able to explain to me why we're removing those targets and why it's more meaningful for us to just see the data for trend analysis. So can you just give a little capsule there, because I think it would make everybody feel
And
better.
you can define jurisdictional complaints also.
Okay.
That's 2 questions.
Okay. So jurisdictional complaints, one of the things that was in the Sunset Action Report was for the agency to come up with a better way of tracking non-jurisdictional complaints. Okay? And so once we get complaints, every day, they come in and we have to look at them and determine, is this something we can actually do something about? It may be that something that we have no jurisdiction over. This person showed up and they were mean to my dog. They came for the listing and they kicked my dog. Well, Is that, I don't think we have a rule about cruelty to animals, but
Commissioner Rickash, I can clarify. Yeah, in addition to what Mr. Olmixon said about non-jurisdictional complaints, it also excludes all the background history cases from applicants. So all the applicant, it would include a respondent with criminal history, but all applicant cases are removed as well. And that was a state measure that we sort of inherited.
okay. So hopefully that answers the jurisdictional complaint issue. Now, the number of complaints that we get. We have been remarkably, not counting criminal history type issues that we have to look at, but remarkably consistent in the 2,000 to 2,500 per year kind of the numbers. Well, if you add in all of the issues with background history, it doubles all of that. But just the jurisdictional complaints. This particular one, for example, there's one on here that says, how many resulted in discipline? So we give that information to you, and you direct the enforcement committee, for example, to say, you know what, we have too many that are disciplined. We need a kind of a deferred adjudication path. We need an alternate, instead of just giving these people discipline, how about we give them education, and if they complete the education, then we don't discipline them, right? So that's something that we report the data to you, we trend analyze it, you decide how you want that to come out. If it turns out, for example, that we're getting a lot more discipline, and a lot of that discipline has to do with some particular deficiency, you may essentially tell us, well, that needs to be a major item in the next education course that we write, is to address that particular pattern that we're seeing, okay, of that kind of thing, whether it's unlicensed activity or the failure of effective intermediary is one of those things that we see a lot. There is no fix, just realize this, there's no fix for, it's not an education problem when people steal their clients' money, okay? It's not like they thought they weren't doing something wrong, okay? They knew they were doing something wrong. So there's other fixes for that, okay? But there's other things that if we make the rule too complicated and people have inadvertent violations of that rule because we overcomplicated it, that's something we can do something about. So the kinds of discipline, the percentage of discipline, I think is important for you guys to be aware of and for us to trend to analyze. But to have a target and say artificially, only 15% of our complaints should result in discipline, then who are we letting off if we're trying to get to 15%? Yeah. Or if we're only at 5%, who are we going after that we shouldn't have in order to try to get to 15%? That kind of doesn't make sense. Yes?
It's my understanding also that a lot of these categories, similar to the number of applications we receive, we don't have any direct control over the number of apps we receive, the number of complaints we receive, whether those complaints are jurisdictional or non-jurisdictional. So for us to have
metrics, basically a historic
a target for these things that we have no control over, there's nothing useful in that, because those targets are just kind of based on historical data.
The data's useful.
But to watch the trends and watch the history is also, which they're going to continue to do month to month, and then we'll receive quarterly, year to date, month to month data.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Okay.
And I just want to also share that we talked about this for a couple hours.
Yeah, a long time.
The other day, Avis and Commissioner Arriaga and I. So I just want to make sure you all understand that we had worked through this and it got comfortable with it.
And the reason for that is looking over the form, whether we ought to discontinue or not, but also the data is just as important, because we're seeing it for the first time. It was handed to us. you're seeing it for the first time, I guess, when you received the information yesterday. But it's good. We go through it, Mr. Olmix.
As you're on page 7, is what we're on, if you're following along. This is a very high visibility. It says percent of calls answered in less than 10 minutes. It actually turns out that the system can't track that. Can't track that. But what it can track is the average hold time among all the calls. And that's something we've been reporting to you and will continue to report to you. And that's something that you do want to set a target.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think that Commissioner Leonard's initial prompting, I think the executive committee said, absolutely, what's it going to take to get to 5 minutes? We're going to figure out how to do that. Okay, and so that's a target. It is listed in the measure. Okay. Sorry.
My question is, what I feel guilt about that we haven't been asking is, you say that the system won't answer that, but is there a system that will answer it, or why not, and can it be fixed to be set up? And we have a new IT guy.
Well,
Snap your fingers and make it happen.
so the average hold time across all calls is a metric that is meaningful. What percentage of calls, and I probably don't have as sharp an example for this as I should, but if 80% of all calls are answered in less than 5 minutes, okay? But the average is 8 minutes because there are 2 queues with 20-minute hold times. That's not a good thing, right? Right. So the average hold time overall is the metric that we want. If you're going to call in, on average, you're going to be answered in less than 5 minutes or 4 minutes or 3 minutes or however. We just keep, as you heard yesterday, when you hit that one target, we're going to reset it and figure out what's possible. What's possible with the level of resources that you want to spend.
Just keep bringing it down.
Right.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir?
I don't know whether we discuss it here or maybe it's later on how a call center works. And I got to see it, and kudos to staff, you're on top of each other. And I'm sure you have earphones and everything else, and probably staffed up already, but we need space. And we also talked in the secretary, maybe the call center ought to be in Brownsville. It was in Brownsville, it said Tyler.
You said
Yeah, North Texas.
Or in the Philippines, or wherever. And because there's certain answers. Is it possible that if a phone is not picked up, it rings at somebody else's desk, even if they're not in the call center, maybe administration?
Is it possible to forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Because, and I know you're busy, everybody's busy, but there should be a way, I don't know anything about call centers, but the way the phone systems are rotated to where if it's ringing, it bugs the heck out of me. So I pick it up, although I'm the boss, only 2 people in my office. But sometimes I have to pick it up. If we can route it to someone else that might be able to answer. And I know the questions, everybody knows the answers, especially administration. Would that be possible?
I'll let Tony, if that's okay, who's been studying all this.
I just want to say, unfortunately, not everyone does know the answers to those questions. So you want to make sure that they're answered by somebody who can help the person on the phone.
That's a given.
Because there's, well, exactly, and you don't want, I mean, we could lower the hold time by just having anyone answer the phone, but the added frustration that would be if they're not getting the answers that are helpful, then there's an added frustration. The hold times are lower, but the answers, their people aren't being helped on the other end. So it's trying to get to that spot where we're under 5 minutes and people are hanging up and they feel, I got the answer I want.
I disagree. Yes, you need information, but answering the phone is number one.
No, I don't disagree with that, sir, and I agree that we're shooting for getting at 5, less than that if we can, but Yes, sir.
I'll actually disagree with you, because the most frustrating customer service thing to me is when you call somebody, you get somebody on the phone, you explain your entire problem.
Right.
And then they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you.
I'll have to
And they
transfer
forward you
you.
to somebody else, and you have to do it all over again.
So we got systems we can say, we're gonna call you
That's the
back
truth.
immediately.
Yeah.
I have to say, they're gonna call you back, because that's our salvation right now, right?
Well, speaking of the callback system, can we include the numbers on that in here? So how many people are, what percentage of calls are called back?
You'll
And all
see
that
that,
stuff.
absolutely. That's a statistic that you'll see every month.
Yeah.
And it's tracked, and as a part of the there's a 2-year and 4-year reporting for Sunset. We have to do it both monthly and quarterly.
So I asked about it yesterday, and
Yeah.
we didn't know.
Well, we can get it, and I apologize. The numbers I've been reporting in my monthly report are, was what I understood. I understood the DQ calls to be all calls handled by the callback
Yeah.
system, and I found out that's not the case. That's just calls that were, that as well as those have been transferred. We do have a number of calls that were handled through the callback center, so we can in fact give you that number.
And I think that's important too, it's just a broader point, like with, statistics and definitions, and we're dealing with calls, and like, what is a held call? What is a, because like these are terms, but they don't have broadly understood definitions, so.
It's not immediately apparent what you
Yeah,
mean by
what
that.
we mean by that, what's a held call, I don't know.
So it is one of the statistics that the percentage of abandoned calls against the total number of calls, and the number that is handled through the callback, courtesy callback is
Great.
what we call it.
Courtesy call.
Number and percentage, those are easily calculated.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Then the last group, number of services accessible, is an annual report. That's how many more things are we making online? Are we providing online that we didn't have before? The majority of the services that we provide are already online. Okay, but we have other ones that we're not, that we want to add, because the goal is to have all of them at some point available online. The number of in-person queries, calls received, emails answered, online customer surveys, visits to the agency website, all of that data is already on a customer service report every month, and you'll see it. Continue to see that month to month. So they're numbers. And then the last part, working with hubs, that's a state-required report set. It's required to be reported annually. It has its own measures internally. We have always exceeded those generally by 100% or more. We've always been very good about our purchasing department targeting historically underutilized businesses.
Is the 30% a state mandated target, or is that our internal target?
No, that's state mandated.
Okay.
And it can change from time to time, and other metrics are put in there, but it's a standalone set of data that's required to be reported annually.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
And why are you recommending to eliminate that one?
We'll report it annually instead of quarterly. We were tracking it quarterly. We're only required to report it annually, and no one has ever asked a question about it other than to say, do you have targets? And the answer is yes, state has targets, and we do very well against them. And so once a year, is that okay? That's the question for you guys.
And the reason I want to see it, because that's something I always track, and we did very well, but that could change.
Yes.
And then we got to find out a year later. That's why it's important to see it quarterly. Same thing with the next line on conflict.
So that group of 4, we're suggested that we give that to you annually, but if you want to see it more often, that's at your discretion. I mean, you want it on request or you want it routinely? That's
Quarterly.
another issue.
Well, I think-
Routinely, quarterly.
Routinely, quarterly, leave it in?
Are we keeping up with this so that, do we already have a motion that we're
No, I'm
working
just,
through?
No.
So maybe someone would make a motion when the time comes to.
well, the rest is any questions from you guys on this part of the measures report?
Now, we don't have to decide today, we can decide when they get rid of the Viagra, right?
I'd rather decide on it today. So routinely, quarterly, do I make a motion? Or do
If you look on page 291, there are some recommended motions, and staff would recommend that you authorize staff to eliminate, add, and revise performance measures as presented. If you want to accept everything with that one change, you would use the motion that's in the middle and just say, read that motion and just say, with the exception that the reports regarding pubs and contracts be given quarterly.
I'm going to give it staff. We move that the commission approve staff recommendation with the following changes to include the hub participation on a quarterly basis.
Second. Okay, are we ready to discuss that? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. So we're off with agenda item 21 now.
All right, thank you very much, Commissioners. There are some other materials in here behind tab 21. And so what I'd like to do is have the directors, what I ask the directors to do is looking at both the measures and their monthly reports, to go through and make recommendations for how do we sharpen those? How do we give you what we believe you want, that you can hold us accountable to, and that tracks things that you want tracked. So a couple of times between December and February, we sent out requests, and we did get some responses back from commissioners and board members that basically said, make sure that you're paying attention to this, make sure you're paying attention to that. And so we tried to incorporate all of those. We brought those recommendations to internal staff meeting, and then we also brought them to the executive committee. So I'd like for each of the directors to get up and just talk through their report, and then they'll answer any questions that you want about that. This is what their monthly reports are what we're suggesting the monthly report should look like. Robert, you're up first.
Good morning, Robert Hood, Director of the Reception and Communication Services Division. Some of the changes we've made to our reports will be as follows. We tried to streamline the report as much as possible and give all the information to you on maybe 1 to 2 pages. And I wanted to point out some of the things that you wanted to see right away, like the number of calls that were presented to us, the number of calls we handled, our hold time, and our abandoned call rate. We'll put all that information up front, and I did make a note that we can add the number of callbacks and the percentage of callbacks on there as well.
Thank you.
And then the next part of it, scroll up just a little bit more. Next part, we have a graphical representation of the number of calls presented, the number of calls abandoned, and the number of calls handled. Just a visual representation of the stats that are in the chart above it. Then we'll show the number of walk-ins per month. And we'll still separate the number from from the number of board the number of board walk-ins and the number of commission walk-ins. So you'll be able to see those numbers. And then the last one will be just the number of emails. We'll show that per month how many we've handled, and we'll separate the number of emails for the board and for the commission. And I'll go back just a little bit to the top. We are in the process of seeing if we can separate the board calls from the commission calls, so that it's a number that we'll add to there as well. It's consistent about 95% of the calls are for the commission, about 5% for the board, but we'll actually have some numbers to give you instead of a percentage. And then currently the C2 report is a survey results. We're in the process of revamping our survey, and we're going to the SurveyMonkey platform. We'll be able to give some more beneficial information for you.
Nice.
Omling, Commissioner Miller, and Arriaga have questions.
Does the call center answer both the calls and the emails?
Yes.
So do we want to, which one's best? What do you want the public to do? Do you want them to call or do you want them to email?
Their choice.
But
One of the things when they're holding is to say, if you can, send us an email, we'll respond to that as well. So it really is, we want to give a multi-channel approach.
and in that recording that they're listening to, if you say, it may be faster to email.
It depends on their question too, because the emails, we respond to most of our emails within 2 business days, but if they need an answer right
So
then,
it's
right
not
then and there,
faster to email.
It might not be.
Yeah.
It might not be.
Okay.
Depends on the value.
But I know realtors don't read, but I also know that sometimes, you know, I do a lot of emailing at midnight, and a lot of my coworkers do as well. And if they can email their question, and if we can promote emailing, it might solve some of the heavy pressure. And I don't, I mean, flash something big every newsletter and stuff like that.
And that's
Just
one of
try
the things,
email.
that's some of the information I wanted to gather from our customers in our customer service survey. You know, how many people are emailing us, how many people are phones, and was their service more satisfactory over the phones, or was it more satisfactory with the emails? So some of the information I'm trying to gather now.
But didn't I hear you say that they give them their choice once they call in? So
Yes.
I think it would just
And it's
probably
also
tell
on
them
our
they can
website,
email
or
right
it's
there.
on our website as well.
You still need to say something?
Yeah.
Commissioner Arriaga has a question. Mr. Hood.
Mr. Hood,
Yes.
welcome on board.
Thank you, sir.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you think by hiring you, we can make a difference in the problems that we have.
I said a little bit yesterday in my introduction that I've been in call centers for about 19 years, and I truly believe that there's no need in reinventing the wheel. There's call centers in the state of Texas, I've worked in them, that are experiencing the same issues that we are right now. And through automating processes, finding out what our constituents and our customers want, we're able to make some changes within the organization and be able to handle those hold times and get the hold time lower and address the abandoned call rate. So that's some of the things I'm trying to do right now, just assess the situation and get some real live data and able to dive in and figure out what's causing us to have the longer hold time.
And if it does not work, why would it not work? I guess it has to work. Is that correct?
Yeah, it has to work. We want the 5-minute hold time, so yes, it has to work. 3 minutes.
Thank you.
5 minutes yesterday, 3 minutes today.
Sustainable hold time.
Yes. And like I discussed yesterday too, we can put 60 people on the phones, but we still have people that are going to call and ask me about process. How long is it going to take me to process the application? Why is it taking so long? So we need to go to the root of the cause. Why are people calling? And then we can determine how many staff we need in order to handle those calls. So just right now, it's just about fact gathering and seeing why we're calling and what the customers want.
How long will it take to get it down to 5 minutes, you think?
That I could not give you. Right now we have the 8 people in training. They're going to be on the phones in about 3 or 4 weeks. They'll be on the phones. We have some abilities now with our phone queues to adjust personnel, so that'll give us some relief. The app tracker that's going online, that should reduce some of the phone calls, because customers will be able to go online and see where their application is. So as far as the time frame, I foresee us having a little bit of impact within the next 4 weeks. Don't know how much that impact will be though.
Commissioner Westcott.
I have a friendly question along his lines. How long do you anticipate you will need to gather an appropriate sample size of calls to understand why people are calling, and then make decisions thereafter on how we should change things?
Once we get all 8 on the phones, probably give us about another month, and then we'll be able to determine from there.
That's fast.
So you got a year.
Any other questions for Mr. Hood? Looks like this next back. Are you done?
Yes, I was done.
Okay. Looks like Ms. Jackson, you're next.
I'm going to give you one more just one more piece of information about that, Robert, thank you, is that, Robert is carrying on something that, when you ask, how long will it take us to do that? One of the things that I want you to clearly know is that that's in addition to what we've already learned, and I think the most important thing, because we've been asking that question all along, it's like, that's how we came up with the app tracker idea, right? That's one of the largest volumes of calls is where are you on my, question mark. And then technologically, can we do that? So as each of those tools, we get more people, we get more flexibility of being able to move callers quickly to the areas of demand. We redesign the queues to, meet particular needs. So each one of those will have some impact. And so that's the beauty of having someone who's managed call centers for a long time, and then someone with like Tony's customer service focus is the big picture. As Robert said, if it was just about answering the phones, we could outsource all that and we could answer all the phones immediately. But that's not what it's about. It's about actually providing customer service. So when they call, they actually get their question answered.
Or we provide them the information so they don't have to call.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Jackson?
Lynn Jackson, Director of Education and Licensing Services. Currently, the ELS division provides you all with 5 reports during the commission meetings. And what we're proposing to do is to streamline and cut those down to 2 reports for you all. This document here that's on the screen provides you with information as to the suggested revisions for the reports. And what I'll do is basically summarize for you. The L1 report is the report that provides you with the real estate broker and sales agent applications received, licenses issued from applications, and renewal activity. What I'm proposing is to streamline this report and remove data that's presented elsewhere. And I've given some detailed information there in the middle section for the suggested revisions. But this is what that report would look like. And one of the things we've also done is included the data from the L1A report, which is a separate report that I provide to you all. And that's the report that provides the same type of information for inspectors. And we thought it would be easier if we went ahead and combined the 2 license types onto one page, cut down on the number of pages you've got in the material. And this is what that report would look like. We've also got Christine's going to be working to see if we can't get that information presented to you in a more visual format. It's providing some challenges to us.
This is the new report.
To do that for
297, yes.
And then the other report that we'd like to show. Now, this is the L2 report, which I think provides you all with good information.
That's
It
the
gives you
number.
a 13-month totals, if you will, for our license types. But along with this, what we'd like to do is provide you with the next report, which basically gives you a visual, because it's a little difficult to look at all those numbers, but here you can see a snapshot of what the trends over the year look like. And then there's a little explanation at the bottom for why there was a little dip there.
Mr. Prescott, and then Ms. Moore.
I was going to say, this is great to get sort of the trend over like a short period of time. I think most of us would be interested in just a refresher on every meeting, like over that trend a long period of time, like, 5, 10, 25 even years, however long.
Have that.
Yeah.
And we can include it as a resource.
Yeah.
Continuously.
I think that's great, yes. I would like that.
Ms. Miller had a question.
What I think you've taken off of this report is the appraisers. and I know they go to the board. At the same time, I know that I like to know that stuff, and I don't know if anybody else here does, but it kind of shows us a trend in what's happening in the real estate business.
Yeah.
When appraisers aren't getting licensed, there's a reason, and that affects our people getting loans.
That's right.
And you're correct, we do provide this type of data for the TLCB, the board.
But we've been getting that, right?
No.
Yeah, I've seen that somewhere.
We've been getting inspectors.
Right.
Did we used to get it?
I was getting that.
You never got it?
No.
I thought we got it.
We've never had appraisal board reports, but the reason I wanted to see that MOU again, we voted it on already, because sometimes my fat fingers move faster than my mind. I wanted to find out on the appraisal side, how much water do they carry, especially on the building and work. And when you get to that, I want to bring up some stuff that I think it was a surprise to me, and that you need to be aware of. So it's important we see that maybe once a year.
No, but once a year, when we do the annual review of everything, of the annual review of the appraiser trend data, would be a good thing to include.
That's right. That's what they said. Okey dokey. Got it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. Anybody else? You done? Okay. I apologize for not knowing what y'all have done while I was not here, so.
That's all we did.
We don't expect you to be a psychic.
Okay. The strategic plan is just here as reference. Is that
Right,
correct?
that was with the performance measure
That's just reference.
definition. So we are now.
So we're now on agenda item 22. Thank you, Commissioner. So who is on this? Mr. Robinson.
Action on this one? I don't know.
Well, as we mentioned yesterday, I would just tell you while we're waiting on Doug to make a appearance, the executive committee had some discussion, not an exhaustive discussion about the long-term facilities master plan. We just discussed it lightly and felt that the decisions made on this needed to not be pushed in any way by the executive committee, that this body make the decision.
Thank you.
Of where we go from here.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm supposed to take one and pass one, I'm not paying attention.
Tell us
Okay.
the story.
Thank you, we'll look at that later. Mr. Olmixon, now that you're back, you're on agenda item 22.
Okay.
So,
So, Commissioners, one of the things that was very clear, and I put it in the memo to you, was that you know, despite our best efforts and the evidence that, you know, shows the progression of the decision-making and the policy-making and the approval to set aside funds and the conditions on the use of those funds and all of that, that the Sunset Commission still felt that there was insufficient oversight of that process. And so much so that, as you see in the legislative report yesterday, the chair filed a bill to essentially put into place all of those safeguards that we had voluntarily agreed to operate under, but they became now not voluntary but mandatory. Okay, if that bill passes, which I suspect that it will. The long and the short of that is that it's the staff's analysis and estimation and recommendation that, in fact, that every step toward that objective, however reasonable that objective appeared at the time, is an enormous amount of expended energy that will be subject to extraordinary scrutiny at every step. Okay. And so And so wouldn't it behoove us as a commission to simply set that aside for now? Let that decision be handled by a future commission if necessary, or if advisable, under whatever standards, or the legal standards that are already, that will be put in place. The recommendation, of course, was to take away the authority for this commission to independently decide whether or not it was appropriate to take away the authority to construct and own facilities. Okay? So with that taken away, we still have the authority to lease, and we still have the authority to manage what we lease. But independent of that, we would need to ask for specific permission. Well, that's exactly the path that we were on for several years, looking at the Capitol complex. Ask for specific permission, and that is well, it's the path that we've been on. However, with the amount of activity that's going on in the Capitol complex for the next 8 years, the construction of 3 major phases of this development of the Capitol Mall, the Texas Mall, right out in front. Of course, you see the giant building and all fences everywhere. There'll be six new buildings built, 1.5 million new square feet, a little more added, 5 stories of underground parking added, all of that. But this is it is a distraction, and it's a distraction that we believe we don't need. We don't need for the foreseeable future, and we need to get ourselves. We need to get to a place where it's unquestionable, rather than iffy, whether or not we can do all of the things that we're charged to do at the highest possible level that we're charged to do them at, and at levels that you're comfortable with and our stakeholders are comfortable with. And so the recommendation would be to eliminate the purpose of this reserve, okay, that long-term facility master plan. Eliminate the purpose of this reserve, to rename so eliminate that, which means amending the reserve policy to eliminate. Take the funds that are in there, allow it to be designated at the will of the majority, which is what it already says. In other words, no money could be spent from that reserve except as approved by this body. That's the position that we're in today, based on last year's decision that you made, and it would be the decision going forward. It's just that none of those purposes would be about building a building. Now, for example, if we needed to remodel some of this space to have a larger contact center, or to make this, then those are potentially things we could bring you a project and say, we need to spend $250,000 to remodel our suite here. Are you guys okay with that? Here's what it would look like, here's the time frame, blah, blah, all that stuff. And then you make that decision. If there are other things, as I noted in here, we need to replace our database system. And we need $2.5 million or $3 million to do that. And we come to you and say, this is the rationale for it, this is the time frame for it, this is the budget for it. It would come from this major projects fund, or whatever you determine to call it, but has nothing to do with building a building. Okay? That would be the recommendation that we would make. There is one thing that is on here that I wanted to kind of update you, just to say the latest information that we have. I talked on here about background checks, and I don't want to get off on a giant rabbit hole. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I do want to tell you this, is that the information that we gave you here, that project looked like it might cost us could cost somebody about $6 million. It appears that some of the right hand and left hand not knowing what each other's doing was happening at in that world at DPS as well. And so it appears that we can actually get the documents signed, so we don't have to get new prints for everybody who already has prints but hasn't signed the appropriate documents. That was, we were told flatly, that was not an option, and then it turns out that it may be an option. And if that's true, then we don't have to spend near that kind of money to implement this program. The good thing about that particular program, which we'd like to implement this year, is it saves $28.25 every 2 years for every license holder forever.
But first we got mentioned.
Yes.
We got to decide whether we're going to build a building or not, I think.
Let's put
Yeah,
it
but,
out of our hands now.
So-
he's going through this whole thing.
So all I wanted to I just wanted you to update you on that
323.
one thing. So there are plenty of, obviously there's $11.4 million that has been set aside in that fund over the years. The things that we need to do internally, we can do with other resources, unless we come and ask you specifically to say, would you please allocate $250,000 for us to do this remodel? Or would you please allocate $3 million for us to do, to redo our database or update something?
What was the average interest rate you were earning on the 11.4 million?
I think it was 1.25.
1.25?
Or something like that.
We spoke about
we were
this
in
before, yeah.
treasuries. We were in treasuries, so we're always under 1.5. I think one of the most
That was
recent
one.
ones might have been 1.5.
Yeah, as much as,
Commissioner Leonard,
maybe not even that high, is what I'm looking at.
Commissioner
Okay.
Leonard.
Short-term treasuries.
Short, yeah.
That's why, yeah.
1 year.
I know, you can't do anything about it.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
It's just safety.
I believe me, I had that thought 6 years ago. So, as an investment guy.
But let's just make sure that if we are going to reallocate the funds, that you know how it goes when you go into the candy store and you got all this candy out there. Let's make sure that we stay focused on maintaining it as much as possible. Because we don't want to get into a spending spree and then you look up 2 years from now, you run into some difficulties. We want to make sure we have those funds still there as much as possible.
I'm 100% in agreement, and the way that control, I think, remains absolutely in place is that the policy says we can't transfer any money out of that and spend it on anything without your specific approval.
Beautiful.
Okay? And so, which means, for example, if we get ahead on our technology projects and that 1.3 million, we're at a place where, we're down to $300,000 left, and we've identified another tranche of projects that we can accelerate, and that's another $500,000 or $1 million, that we'll come and ask you for that permission to reallocate those funds.
Commissioner Leonard,
Could you give us a short 2-minute history lesson on where this $11.5 million came from?
Sure.
I mean, what was the inception of that?
Sure. So I provided you guys with a two-page history of all the milestones. I think it was at the October or November meeting, history of all the milestones. May have been as early as August. In the long-term facilities, it's a complete history of that particular project. But where the money came from?
Right here.
Where the money came from is, if you look at this, so it's kind of fortuitous, but if you look at this rise right here, of this consistent number of 8,000, 9,000, 10,000, 8,000 net new license holders year over year over year, okay? Even with all of the other expenses rising, looking at adding more staff, paying them better, buying better technology, all of that stuff, we still had, at the end of each budget year, after taking care of people, taking care of technology, and our routine operating expenses, we still had significant funds. Now, we also, in that time frame, have given back about $2.7 million in fees. Okay, so in addition to this money that was put away, before we put any money away, we always look to see, is there a way to give some of that back? And so we made some adjustments in fees over time. This is the blessings of momentum, of the Texas miracle, as anyone with the political aspirations would talk about it. But it really is we have the great blessing to have been at this moment in time on this rise. And so the excess funds were truly that excess revenue. And I know the chairman of Sunset doesn't like that terminology, and I understand it. I just don't know how else to accurately describe it. I think the general tone of that recommendation was that if you had more, you should have given back more, right, as opposed to putting aside more.
But at some point, and this is prior to my service here, somebody, somewhere, some entity gave us the direction to start socking money away into long-term facilities account.
It wasn't somebody, it was this body. We did it. This commission. So we made a recommendation, said, here we have this opportunity. And so in that long history, which I'll give you the really, really tiny version, at the very beginning, we've been approached by another SDSI agency about coming in to their project that they were going to build. Okay? And we said, no, it really doesn't work for us. We have a great landlord here. We don't need necessarily another landlord at a different place. They weren't going to be in the Capitol complex. After their first time they looked, it was at the same property that Facilities Commission then said, well, actually, that might work just for you guys. So we kind of worked through a little pro forma. I made a presentation about it and suggested that this could be a possibility. It didn't have all the controls. The master plan for the Capitol complex was not yet in place. And so the estimation was about $12 to $15 million you could be in your own building and control your destiny, your occupancy costs. And if you expanded or shrank, you could lease it out and make more money, offset. That's the basic dynamics of it. When the Capital Master Plan came in, one of the features of the Capital Master Plan was that each and every available property in the Capitol complex had to be developed to its maximum economic potential. To Facilities Commission, that meant that needed to be twice as big as they had specified for us. We didn't have that capacity to do that on our own, so we needed specific permission, we needed to find partners, all of those kinds of things. It made it vastly more complex. We went through that process with the Facilities Commission all the way along. In 2017, there was a suggestion that go ask for the specific permission. And then that got, the governor's office said, we don't know anything about that. You guys can deal with that in the future. Take it off the table for now. So that's how we ended up where we are.
I'd like to clarify some stuff and risk of stepping on people's toes. A little bit more to it. And it's all about communication, guys. I didn't ask the right questions. Commissioner Bob said, I voted for it because you're on the committee. But what we didn't talk about is the committee only met once and got all this information. And I've been told, and forgive me, Mr. Olmixon, that there's really another layer in this. Today, it was the facilities, the building. Could be something else tomorrow. That's why I'm bringing that up. We have to be careful who's driving the bus. And the reason for that is in 2017, someone, and never got defined, decided we're going to build a building. This commission never did. This commission decided in the very beginning to look at building a building. Never had permission to build a building. So someone somewhere decided we need to do that. And our trade association apparently was doing it. Or was it the staff? That's the kind of stuff that you need to be looking into your heart. You know, where did we take the wrong turn? And make sure that we don't take wrong turns again. And this is what actually got us into trouble with the Sunset. When all of a sudden, in 2017, there was a meeting, if I understand correctly, and the governor's office says, wait, I don't think anything about a meeting. And they were ready to pull the trigger to pass legislation to build a $27 million or more building. Did not make sense because I, as a commissioner, for 12 years, never knew about that.
Well, this happened way before 2017.
Look, regarding that piece of paper, just to be clear, and you knew this, this was in a bill where we were seeking what is in this bill here, 646. We were seeking legislative. That bill went before, and TAR was supporting it, and TAR was supporting our desire to look, it says proposed, it doesn't say done, it says proposed. And the writer of the bill, who was a senator, wanted it taken out of the bill, and it was taken out of the bill. And that was the one that did, what do you call it? Advertising. And so we got the advertising bill, but it did not have the facility in it. So that was TAR's talking points for their, I didn't see it because when you're on the commission, I go to the Hill visits if you're a realtor, but I do not go to the Capitol because I don't want any possibility that I am going to be looked at as someone lobbying. But that was one of their talking points on that bill. And it doesn't say it's a done deal. I could see the word proposed as you were holding it up. So let's be clear.
You got to read it. You got to read it to make sure.
What is it, Adrian?
Get everybody a copy. You've had a copy.
No.
Everybody has a copy
Everybody has a
in their materials.
It's behind the report that was passed out yesterday.
And it was, and the one thing that I just want to make sure that is very clear to everyone, it's very specifically asking for permission for the Facilities Commission to work with us on the potential development of that facility. Okay, asking for the permission, it was required by the statute for us to ask for specific permission. The Facilities Commission said, well, yes, that's the next step. We can't work with you unless we get this, we get permission to do that under the master plan. And so in November of 2016, we brought that matter to this body. Yep. You can go back and listen to the tape of that particular meeting. And then it was further delegated to the executive committee. And that's where the communication broke down.
Madam Chair?
As Mr. Arriaga says, in February, he was appointed to the executive committee. And there was a meeting, an executive committee member was at the meeting, but all of the executive committee members were not informed of the potential for that meeting, which I think we got notice on Thursday and the meeting was on Monday.
The main thing is that it's all right to build a building, but we just got to know about it. And before we pull the trigger, we need to know buy versus sell. And I know the history from day one because, but somehow either staff or a trade organization decided to carry the flag bigger and higher. And it's no big deal as long as we agree with that. But just be cautious of that in the future. Thank you.
And I would just say that, I mean, I certainly agree with every word that you just said, and I don't feel like we've ever taken action beyond, putting money in this plan and then, making certain inquiries and discussions about whether or not it's what we ought to do. And if it ever came before us that, this is kind of the go, no-go moment, here's what we're doing, yeah, we ought to vote on that. And I look forward to that day happening or not happening.
And to come down to the situation also, the appraisal board also put in $1 million. And they had no communication on the money was being put in. So it's a learning lesson, and I'm glad we're
I doubt that the appraisal board, they have to approve their budget.
I spoke to him. The committee member on the facility committee with Mr. Moore and I we discussed it. He called me. He was not aware of that.
What would you say, General Counsel?
The board was well aware that every year when it was approving its budget that the reserves were being allocated to the long-term facility master plan. The member that Mr. Arriaga speaks of, Mr. Bolton, joined the board a couple of years ago, and he was appointed to the facilities master plan working group. During that time frame, however, that group hasn't been meeting on a regular basis because when the bill failed, this permission failed in 2017, we were kind of stuck in limbo. So the board was well aware that it was putting money aside for that purpose, and we were just waiting to obtain permission and to see where that went.
So Mr. Bolton was appointed in the summer of 2017, so it was after the session when it had failed already, and then there was nothing to do. As the governor's office said, we'll talk about that in 2 years. In the meantime, we stayed with the Facilities Commission, and of course they had their own turmoil over there, and then, of course, we went through Sunset. So that brings us to where we are today.
Mr. Ruska.
Madam Chairman, if it's all right with you, I think we should talk about some of these individual items here.
But Mr. Olmixon didn't talk about that. He just went through telling you that these were ideas of if we were going to move, not going to continue the long-term facilities master plan, that it's just things that might come up financially.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have discontinued allocating funds to the long-term facilities master plan, that's my understanding, right? And so, without specific direction further, I think it would be irresponsible to, continue to hold $11.475 million when we obviously have so many needs, and, we have a few potential opportunities here in front of us to possibly benefit license holders as well as the operations of the commission. So,
if you go down this, which Mr. Olmixon has been doing, this project regarding fingerprints, there was miscommunication inside the DPS or whoever it is that does the fingerprinting and does the checking, and it appears now that all of the old license holders like me who had my fingerprints done a long time ago would not have to have my fingerprints redone, because I can just sign a document saying it's okay to use the ones I did in 2011.
Got it.
And so that almost $6 million may not be $6 million, may be nothing. And so that, he was just telling you that. And then, of course, the next one is the possibility of looking at something to replace Versa, which has some limited abilities in their estimate. But they haven't put it out for a bid. They're just saying, here's some things that maybe we could do. Yes, sir.
And the subcommittee talked about maybe getting some more recommendations. There's no need to start spending money today until you totally vet.
No, of course not.
Yes,
But,
Commissioner Turner.
So go ahead. Did you?
Yeah, I just had one other thing I want to caution everyone about, and just go on the record already as opposing that we need to be careful thinking about any sort of distribution or sending a check or whomever, because people a long time ago who were licensed and paid more, and then now that are rolling off, and I mean there's just no equitable way to do it.
Right.
So we should focus on improving operations
Right.
as well as
Absolutely.
decreasing future fees
Absolutely.
if that makes sense, or decreasing sort of one-time fees such as this fingerprint thing would have done. So
into Mike's point, and never spend all the money.
no, of course.
That's right.
Yeah, no, of course.
To elaborate on his point as well, we need to be careful that we're not using any of these funds or too much of the funds to, for example, supplement our staff, because then when the money runs out, suddenly you have these line items that you no longer have money for. So it's more important, I think, to look at things like the Versa issue, those solitary performance enhancing things. So I did have one question, and I'm embarrassed I don't know the answer to this, but can the legislature reappropriate this money? Can they come reach in here and take this money and put it in
That's a good
GR
question.
or do something else with it? Do you guys know? Tony, do you
Yes
know,
or
or
no?
Doug, or Carrie?
I think they could.
Mhm.
I don't know.
If
of
any
anyone
legislators
who has
are- legislators are
suggested that
listening.
they
You didn't hear
do
that.
And I don't think the Sunset Commission suggested anything
never
like that
suggested.
in their report.
Sure.
In fact, they asked us to give a report on the need for the building and the cost for the building, and that's due in September. So really, the first step, and I'm hearing people who are acting as if this has already happened, but it actually hasn't, is to vote on, do you want to continue with exploring building a building, in which case a committee is going to need to be appointed to prepare that report for Sunset due in September. If you do not want to continue, then you probably need to assign it to the executive committee or the budget committee to study what ways would be best to spend this money and bring that recommendation forward. But very first, you need to decide, do you want to continue with looking at the possibility of a building in the future?
Well, you said a couple of words that scare me.
Okay?
One, you said, I think. We need to know. And let me tell you the reason why. If those dollars are set aside and we decide not to build the building or do something with those funds, we need to know if they can take it, because if they can, we need to put it into another project so we can keep it.
I agree.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, we truly need to know what we're going to do with those funds. If you find out that they can't take it, then we'll keep it in a place, and then we're going to vote on things as it comes. If they can take it, we need to vote on it at a short amount of time where those funds are going to go so they can.
Right. So let me correct a little bit, David,
Okay.
if you want to jump in. There's nothing in the legislation today that would allow them to take it. It would have to be something they put in our state.
When we see the sunset bill. And I also just wanted to comment on the bill that was filed dealing specifically with this issue. The item that addresses any agency that's already allocated funds, it doesn't speak to removing those funds from the agency. It just speaks to a process by which you need to pass before you can continue to allocate funds after the effective date. So the sunset, at least the chair's contemplate, just reading into it without actually speaking to the chair, is not that those funds be removed from the agency's coffers, if you will, but rather that there be things in place with what you do moving forward. So there's not any contemplation so far that those funds be swept in the GR.
Do you have a question?
Yes. Mr. Olmixon, you were in the meetings, I was in the meetings, and I thought, and maybe I'm wrong, that I overheard the conversation that was brought up about we should explore space that's available in the state
Yes.
before we would even go to look at building a building.
The chairman dealing with some other agencies that have had this issue. So not specifically related to us, but triggered by the fact that this was the path that we were on, or at least holding on. Bigger picture just said, we've got agencies that have excess capacity
Exactly.
that are seeking to get rid of it. We have other agencies that want to build more. Isn't there a place where all that information could cross over, right? Before anyone builds a building, they need to look at the excess capacity that's already out there.
Right.
And so that is, we are well aware of that. There's no excess capacity in the Capitol complex, which is the only place we've ever looked.
And that's what this bill contemplates as well, is that before any authority is given by the governor, that the Facilities Commission weighs in on whether there's appropriate space
Right.
elsewhere that would meet the needs of the agency seeking allocation.
Commissioner Turner?
I think Carrie and Commissioner Arriaga are correct that our first order of business is to decide whether or not we want to continue to explore building a building. And if we do, then the next step is the drafting of this report, which might help educate some of the other commissioners or newer commissioners on the pros and cons of doing so, or we can have a vote today.
Great idea.
If we do vote today and we vote not to build a building or not to continue exploring that, these options, one of which is now maybe gone. The other one is very ethereal. It's
Non-specific.
vague, non-specific. What a great problem to have in a lot of ways if we decide not to build a building, but we need some significant work on recommendations coming back to this body on how to spend that money.
But I'm sorry, you're done.
Sure.
But we need to do something, and to answer.
Exactly.
I'm going to try to answer Commissioner Williams' question by using another scary word. I think that they can. And I do know that money is on their radar.
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly.
And I get that.
Right,
that
that's what I'm
information
concerned about.
From the association. The legislative experts at the association tell me that money is on their radar. Now, what the process might be, I don't know.
Yeah.
So we need to do something with it.
the money.
We either need to allocate it somewhere, or as Commissioner Turner said, we need to decide, kind of, or get off the pot on whether we're going to decide to build a building or not.
Mr. Olson?
Consistent with all of the insights and comments that I've heard from the commissioners today, I think our recommendation, or along the lines of that recommendation, are one, to make the decision, ask you to make the decision about whether or not instruct us. Do you want to continue to build a building? Because that's significant, there's a significant disparity if we go down that path versus another path. And that has implications. So that decision needs to be made. Secondly, consistent with what I've heard here today, I'm going to tell you what the board did. That might be helpful. Basically, the board said, okay, so we're not going to pursue a building. So even if the commission decides to build a building, we're just going to be a tenant in it. Okay, we're not going to be a part owner of it. Okay, we need that money for other purposes, and so what they did, which is consistent with our recommendation here today and addresses all the uncertainty part, is this. They said, we renamed the fund, repurpose the fund, still have the controls that say only the full board, not, it's still a majority of the board, but only the board can allocate money from this to be spent. Okay? So you can do all of that today. Then they went one step further and they said, all of you board members, you've heard a couple of ideas for things that might be done. Go back and let your imagination, think about all the things that you that might be helpful to help this agency get better over time, and send those ideas in so the money doesn't get touched. Okay? Send those ideas in. Some of them may require, because the budget committee has to do its work. We are entering the budget development cycle for next year. Okay? So the budget committee may have some recommendations or recommendations to the full commission to touch some of that money for specific purposes for the budget. Regardless of that, the other things, send your ideas in, and then perhaps the next thing to do is, after the session, once we know what the sunset implementation bill looks like, the burdens that it puts on us, the restrictions that it puts on us, then we could potentially workshop that. One will know if they reallocate the funds. If they sweep them, we'll know, right? It'll be in the bill. And then we don't need to have a workshop, because there won't be anything to work with.
I think Mr. Watt was.
So that was a possibility that they looked at, is gather those ideas, wait until May when you see the first draft of the budget, when we see what the bill looks like, because by the May meeting, the bill will have already been through it probably will have already been through both committees. It may still need to be reconciled, but it'll probably have been through hearings in both the House and the Senate. But we'll know. We'll be very close to what it will probably look like. And then you can make decisions with a lot more information and each other's ideas on what might be appropriate to do with those funds if we still have access to them.
Commissioner Westcott, then Commissioner Arriaga.
Madam Chairman, I have a motion. I'd like to resolve that given we are at this time not interested in exploring construction of a new facility, that we rename the Long-Term Facilities Master Plan Reserve Fund the Strategic Projects Reserve Fund, and assign exploration of the use of those funds to the Executive Committee, subject to the fact that they must be voted on. Any use of those funds must be voted on by the entire commission, and we would further request that directors of various staff departments come forward with their ideas as well.
I second that.
Second.
Got a bunch of seconds. Okay. Do we want to discuss that?
Yes.
Okay.
We can always vote for a facility at any point in time. And that decision will have to come from this board. I don't think we'll have a problem anymore in not communicating. And the other side, Counselor, is going to be as long as we building, or talking about building a committee, those funds can be earmarked for that, they cannot take them away, which I don't think they can anyway, but you never know. But the only thing that bothers me about having a building committee is the work that it entails. The building committee, the staff, the consternation, and really we shouldn't do anything until the legislature's over to see what's gonna come out. But that's the reason I second it, because it's okay.
Yeah.
But even if we did not do anything, it's still all right until we find out what the end result's gonna be.
You know, I began my motion with, resolve that we are not at this time interested in building a building for that very purpose, because I think that's where we are right now.
Anyone else wish to speak on the motion?
I do.
Okay.
I just want to stress one thing that Chart said. Doug mentioned that the board directed themselves to go back and come up with whatever ideas that they may have. Obviously, each of the commissioners can and should do that. But I was whispering in his ear, and I'm glad he included it in the motion, that I want to hear from our staff too.
Sorry.
I want to know from each one of our directors. I'd like a wish list. These are the things, and I mean, I don't know if it's brand new MacBooks for everybody. I'm serious. Anything that they think could help them perform their jobs better, and why. And let's hear from them and have some input from them on that topic. Not just us, because we don't necessarily know. We could give you what we'd like to see done here better, like answer the phones faster. You need to tell us what you need to do that.
Yeah.
Jim?
Hasn't that, or has that been a process of budget every year? That the directors give you this is what I want, this is what I have to have in order to set the budget and allocate funds even just on a yearly, everyday.
It is one of the discussions in the budget development process, is division director's wish list. Absolutely. And so the timing is right, because it's time for us to do that anyway as we start building this budget. Now, it may get more expansive simply because of the potential that there are more resources to deal with, getting everybody a hands-free headset that can walk around the entire office and do all of their work while never having to sit at their desk and answer phones.
Just keep in mind,
I'm just.
there's a lot of ways to spend money.
Yeah, we got it.
There are.
Keep in mind.
And it goes fast.
Well,
Yeah.
and what I heard in that motion is exactly right, which I think is consistent with your wishes and reflective of the directive of the Sunset Commission. You decide. We're not going to decide, okay? We're going to make recommendations, you decide.
How sure are we that the fingerprint issue is off the table?
High confidence, 95% is what I was quoted. So I believe that to be, and I tasked one of our lawyers, one of our very good lawyers, to get with their lawyers and tie that thing down. Okay? Make sure we have documents that say, if we do this, then you will accept that. And then we can take our tech folks and say, how do we get this document signed by everybody who has prints today? Do that online. How do we do that? And we come back with a cost for that, and it probably will be a whole lot less than $6 million.
And make sure they will accept email or electronic signatures.
That's a good point.
Or that we come up with the other alternative, right? And that really is nailing it down. It's like, oh, yeah, we e-signed them all. Sorry, that can't happen. It needs to be wet ink signatures. Okay, well, then we got to come up with a different process.
Mr. Chairman, could we vote possibly?
Let's wait for the.
Can we wait for chair?
No, we're good. So if any other comments, let's take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
And thank you, your staff thanks you very much.
Done.
So I'll just make one comment, or sort of a comment question. Do you want to have a deadline for some type of preliminary report on this for May?
The sooner the better.
Yeah.
Talking about recommendations?
Recommendations.
Yeah.
Recommendations to
In my
consider.
opinion, we need to do something like tomorrow.
Well, that's what I was thinking, because
Getting into the
if
process.
it's in a fund that doesn't have any intended purpose for it, specified purpose for it in the
To suggest.
upcoming months.
Sure.
Then that may be something that may be eyed.
That's good.
Yes.
Staff has something else to do.
So 2 suggestions for that, if I might. One is, and it's a new specific agenda item today, is talking about the calendars between meetings, okay? And when the sweet spot is for other meetings. Okay? And the budget development calendar, okay? That's already part of that process. That is part of your updated budget development policy. So my recommendation would be that all of those ideas, internally, the staff has to put those together before March the 15th. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. And if we can get all of the commissioners' ideas as well by the same deadline, that still gives us some time to put them on the right agendas, deal in the first draft of the budget for the budget committee, which will meet probably in the last week of March or the first week of April, before April 10th is their window. So if everyone would agree to adhere to the March the 15th deadline, we should be able to assemble all of that and process it in a way that is consumable by you.
I'd just like to say, I firmly agree with that, and, don't delay, get these ideas out there, even if it's not perfect. I think it's better to have stuff out and, out there floating around than not.
We want them to know that we're moving on this while they're writing the legislation.
And I want to be able to report, we have a report due back. I think it's the next agenda item, a report due back to the Sunset Commission by March the 15th.
On this particular item in September.
Well, no, I understand. The point of it being that if we're not pursuing a building, the thing that we need to ask, we need to report that the body has determined not to pursue a building. And this is the process that we're undergoing to look at potential alternative uses. And so essentially report that and then ask for permission. If in fact we are not pursuing this, then is the September 1 report moot? Or do they still want to see it, even if it's just from a historical perspective? What we were thinking as opposed to what we are thinking. I think it's something that we need to ask. And March the 15th will help us get all of that together. Time to make that report.
Suggest we take it one step further and tell them that we've voted not to build a building and instead to explore ways to implement or use these funds to address the deficiencies identified by Sunset.
Love it.
That's good.
In particular,
Understood.
strategic planning to improve customer service.
Perfect.
That's what needs to be done.
Make
That's
it
the
so.
part that needs to be done tomorrow.
And that's,
Make it so.
Governor Abbott's top priority also is customer service.
So we will
So-
incorporate that and then adjust the policy consistent with your motion.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay, bring that back to you at the next meeting.
Okay, is the investment policy included for information only? Or
Yes.
Because it's contained, the long-term facilities master plan reserve is in there, which is now the strategic projects reserve.
Okay, so are we
Is that 20? Return one?
just 22? Are we are reopening 23?
I don't think we ever really opened it.
We sort of opened it?
We sort of opened it, we never did anything, so,
You want to start?
yeah. You want to pass these down? So 23 is the sunset recommendations. Two of them we've already talked about, the building fund and the performance measures, but there are other ones in here that will require several, that we can update you on, and then I've passed around something for several recommended motions for some of the items that are in here. So we can go through these, and if you need more explanation than what is already in red, we'll be happy to give them. The first one, recommendation 1.1, is a change to the statute that we've referenced already today, where the Sunset Commission recommended that the reporting requirements and the property ownership requirements set out in 472, the statute, chapter 472, be put into our chapter 1105. Basically, all we can do on this and many of the other items where they're recommending sunset statutory changes is wait for the bill to come out and then review the language to make sure that they've addressed or hopefully addressed it in a way that we thought the sunset report was written. For instance, for the instructor, not having instructor approval, being able to have the authority to set standards for instructors at a minimum. So all of that is going to happen sometime around before March 8th. The language will come out March 8th. We're going to need somebody to look at that language from the commission. It's going to happen before the next meeting. So my recommendation on the very first motion up there is that the executive committee be delegated the authority to review and approve any legislative language proposals to modify statutes affecting the agency. So if we spot something that we say, no, that really isn't going to work, we can go to the author of the bill and say, yeah, this is what Sunset recommended, this is what we really need, and here's why. But we're going to need someone to review that language if it's needed. And at this point, I don't know because we haven't seen the bill. So.
Ariana, you go first.
We're going to be discussing this now, is that right? This relates to this?
Well, I can't see what
the sunset.
That's the sunset report
Yes,
with all the
sunset.
stuff.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's what we're looking at.
As you read it, you'll see that a dozen times says the executive committee is going to do this. And a dozen times we're waiting for sunset, which is logical because that's to come. And I was asked a question last week, what are the roles of the executive committee? At some point in time, maybe not right now, we got to discuss that because I really don't know other than I'm in it, I'm happy. But also we discussed when we met with the joint appraisal board, we talked about everything that's sent to executive committee, send it to the rest of the commissioners.
Send the information.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, and because this does not say that. It says the executive is going to do it, but at the same time, everybody's
Copy.
be able to see the information and can ask questions or follow along what's happening.
Right.
You can modify
Right.
the language, this is only a proposal. I mean, certainly,
Right, well, you do need to delegate the authority to actually approve because
Approve
it's gonna
stuff, yeah.
happen before the next meeting. But
I'm in
certainly, everybody can be informed of everything that's going on.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair?
yes.
So, under agenda item 26, we made some commitments previously for enhancing the communication, some of which we've already done, but it includes precisely what Commissioner Arriaga is requesting, which is that when a committee meets, when a committee meeting is set, and that agenda is set, that everybody gets notice of it. Everybody gets notice of it. So that's consistent with his request. Is something we'll be talking about on agenda 26.
Well, and we also, at the executive committee meeting, we're very clear that as soon as the bill came out, that General Counsel was going to go through it and kind of make some comments and get it out to us as quick as possible. As soon as the bill's filed, right?
And I'll send it to the whole commission.
The whole, all of us, not just 3 of us.
So you would entertain a motion about 1.1 right this second.
Sure.
I move that the executive committee is delegated the authority to review it and approve any legislative language proposals to modify statutes affecting the agency.
Second.
Motion is second.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. 1.2, the budget policy.
Actually, it's 1.3, sorry, the 1.2 is performance measures, and we already
Been over
addressed that.
Yeah, okay.
So this was information and Ms. Nico's not here anymore.
She has not gone far because her binder's still there.
Okay. This was what she was alluding to yesterday in
Yeah.
her report. So this is just the place where we do the action item to actually make a change to the budget policy to allow these transfers from respective reserve funds to the operating budget after the approved expenditures have been approved by this body, and then put it into the operating budget because we have to for accounting purposes, and then documentation for all such transfers will be provided for ratification at each commission meeting. So you'll always be informed, but transfers for payment can be made on the proper books at the appropriate time, but it will always be for monies that have been approved to be expended.
Yep.
And Commissioner TJ brought this up, that we've got to be careful not spending money on staff, but this one does. But it's immediate staff for the call center, if I'm not mistaken.
It's tech people.
No staff at all.
It was tech, it was consultants for tech, wasn't it?
If you look at page 216 and 217, that's the item.
Yeah.
But there's the policy that's embedded in this, that this is a demonstration of that procedure. We want to document in the policy. One of the things that the Sunset basically said is make sure that your policies have very specific guidance. And so the recommendation here is both to approve this particular transfer and this process of documentation. We'll put that into the policy if you agree with that today.
I stand corrected, there's no staff involved in this one.
This is only technology transfer.
Madam Chair, if proper, I move that we direct the staff to update the operating budget for fiscal year 2019 as follows. Increase expenditures totaling $302,041 to cover expended and encumbered costs for our identified tech projects. Number 2, increase in anticipated revenue of $125,000 to correct prior revenue adjustment. And number 3, to transfer the $302,041 to reclassify funds in the tech reserve for the operating budget.
Okay, so you're making the second motion. Okay. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We have another motion under budget policy that we have to make.
Madam Chair, I move to authorize the staff to update the budget policy to allow transfers from the respective reserve funds to the operating budget after approved expenditures per the budget policy are made from a reserve fund to allow for state mandated accounting of those expenditures. Documentation of all such transfers will be provided for ratification at each commission meeting.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay. 1.4, if you're looking at the page 331 with all the red on it, was done at our meeting in November, and those policies are in behind these pages for reference if you want to remind yourself of what we did in November. And then we go to issue 2. As Mr. Iardo has pointed out, a lot of action we can't take until we see the bill. And so that would be the 2.1, eliminate instructor authority. And of course, what we will seek there, as you guys recall, is that the schools would be the ones perhaps letting instructors, is that where I am?
Yeah.
Yes, and we would seek to be able to create the standards for how a real estate school would authorize an instructor to instruct. 2.2, just, we were okay with removing a branch office license anyway, so that we just wanted to see the language. The subjective qualification was good moral standing that they told us we didn't need to have in our, so we're going to see what that says. 2.4 is the residency. We talked a little bit about that yesterday, and that's to be sure that we are able to add, if it's not there, some language about geographic competency. And 2.5 for both the board and the commission, again, waiting on how we would deny non-compliant applicants. And again, we're still waiting on the actual text, so know what that is. And then Carrie has provided, I guess, a motion on her handout today for 2.6, which has to do with the streamlining and review of the pre-licensing education on the inspector side. So we also may see some legislation on this.
So I can give you, Tony and I can give you an update on this.
We'll tag team.
Yeah, this is, I think, very exciting. I think the Inspector Education Subcommittee did a great job coming up with some ideas, and the Inspector Committee all are in favor of it. In terms of streamlining, they looked at two things, not just streamlining the hours in education, but the reason for a lot of the redundancy is the basically 3 license types for an inspector. Almost no one uses the middle one, but the middle one is sort of a stepping stone between apprentice and professional inspector, but because there's a fast track, almost no one does that middle version, and that middle version is where you get a lot of the redundancy because you got to take the class there, but then you got to take the class here because you got to take the test one way or the other. So that is reflected in the statutory change language that has also been attached in your materials in this supplement. So that was step number 1, and that gets away from a lot of confusion. If any of you looked online on how you become an inspector, it's like a complicated chart that no one really understands, and that might actually get rid of a lot of phone calls. But the other interesting thing that they did, which is exactly on point for what the Sunset Commission wanted, is to have the course modules track the national exam guideline. Because although we have the most hours by far of any state for inspector licensure, we have one of the lowest passing rates for the national exam, not for the Texas exam. We have that very good passing rates for the Texas portion. So what the thought is let's bifurcate it. Maybe the problem is they're learning national standard test stuff and Texas exceptions, and they're getting confused. Let's go through the modules for the national exam, have them take those, then take the national exam. After they pass that, have them take the Texas things that are different and unique to Texas. And as part of that, have a module for the Texas part that is the hands-on training, the 40 hours hands-on training. You heard talk about that yesterday. Still very important, very critical. But what they did, if you look on page 11 of 16 of this supplement, is they've got 2 Texas modules. One is more on rules and ethics and things like that, the SOPs that are different. And the second module is the 40-hour hands-on. And what they did is they structured it very specifically to have more consistency in what is being taught and how it's being taught. And the actual, the last topic is a practicum. It's 18 hours, and consists of 3 actual practice inspections where you have to write an actual report and have it reviewed by an inspector to approve and show you what you missed. This is going to provide a lot of really good consumer protection, because right now, you know, you don't even have to write a practice report. You just have to take the ride-along course. So this will really give the consumer, or give us confidence that the consumer will be getting somebody who's not only had hands-on training, but has practiced writing the report, which is critical. You want to add anything?
Yeah, I will try not to repeat anything Carrie said, but one of the issues is we have the standard track, which is your apprentice, your real estate, your professional, and we have a fast track where you can go directly, just from taking classes, directly to be a professional. The recommendation from the inspector committee is to provide the best of both worlds and combine that to one track. So, but in doing so, provide guidance so that the courses follow some consistent approaches to how they're teaching these things. Because right now, it's not just the redundancy in dealing with that middle line, but when you're going on the fast track, they've taken, the committee's taking the opportunity to say, at least in the past, that more hours is better. And to fill those more hours, they've brought some of the same courses up. So there are some inspectors that take the same courses 3 times before they get licensed. So this approach would reduce those hours to what they believe is the absolute core necessity. It would track the national exam, split it up between national and Texas, focus the education, have some consistency in how you learn this stuff, because right now that's all over the place as well. And it would be less burdensome, but be better in terms of the focused education.
And I'll add one thing, the professional track, you had to take 320 additional hours of education, plus the 40 hours of field work, and that's 320 hours in addition to the 90 hours that the real estate inspector license had to have. And what they've done is they've pared it down to inclusive. They've defined fieldwork and practicum in their classroom hours. So total hours that would be taken will be somewhere in a range, the legislation they're requesting is somewhere in the range of 130 to no more than 180. So they put a cap on it, but they wanted some wiggle room to see as the years go on if they need to adjust it one way or another. But it's significantly less than what it was. And because it's so many fewer hours, if they do go with 4 people in a ride-along class instead of the 10, the cost savings for the additional hour, the providers can increase their additional cost for having fewer students per instructor. So I think it's a win all the way around for students, consumers, and providers. And the providers that were there in this meeting, Roy Carter was there, he's for this plan.
He is. And then 2 other things I just want to mention is, one is by bifurcating the license the way they're doing it in terms of focusing on national and state, it helps with reciprocity. If you've already passed a national exam in another state, all you'd be required to take here to get a Texas license is the Texas modules and pass the Texas exam. So that would help in terms of bringing inspectors into the state. The other thing is, I just want to make sure, I'm sure you all understand this, but I just want to make sure you do, is that the sunset recommendation was a management directive. It wasn't a legislative directive. So the reason why this is brought up with the draft legislation is, in order to really do this the way that the inspector committee believes would be the cleanest way to combine and have one track, is to get legislation that would give the guidance for that. So that's out. It's likely to be outside of, well, it will be outside of whatever the sunset bill is. So this would need to be something we'd have to go back to the sponsors and ask them to.
Let me ask you one question about that.
Yes, sir.
Are we passing the exam, the Texas exam, because of the study material is easier or more accessible?
I think
than the national?
I think there's a tendency, and I don't want to speak for the providers, I wish some of them were here. Well, there's one here that can speak to this, but I think there's a tendency to focus on the Texas-specific stuff because it's the SOPs track that to a certain extent, and not necessarily have. And speaking to the providers just off the record or whatever, they've told me that in other states they have these modules that do what this is recommending, fit the national exam. They don't necessarily do that here, and a lot of that has to do with what our rules, the directive our rules give, which aren't very precise.
So we'll probably never be up to par with national.
No, I think this current proposal would go a big difference, because that would track what they're doing in other states.
Okay.
No, they wouldn't learn the Texas stuff until after they've already learned the national and passed that exam, then they take the next.
Yeah, and the national is more comprehensive and a lot more volume.
And there's things on there that aren't Texas specific that some inspectors may or may not. And so by focusing that, I think it focuses the rules and the education on the national portion would address that particular issue.
Commissioner
Just for the benefit of the other commissioners here, this is something else we took a detailed look at in our executive committee meeting the other day. I'm really impressed with this overhaul with the work product of the inspector committee. This is one of the best things I've seen us do since I've been here. It removes unnecessary regulation. It removes barriers to entry. It still protects consumers. They did a heck of a job. So I'm going to give it. I mean, that endorsement from me, and I'm happy to make a motion if we're ready for it. I move the commission approves the education plan proposed by the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee and authorizes staff and the Texas Real Estate Inspector Committee to move forward with requesting legislative changes and developing rules to implement the plan to bring back to the commission for proposal.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Enthusiastic second.
Quick second.
I would just like real quickly, and to say, I don't know if it was Carrie or Tony, but someone on staff planted the seed with the inspector committee that said, forget everything we've ever done, and let's figure out how we create something that will really work. And they bought that and did that.
It was meaningful. This is some meaningful change.
And if I could just
positive
give
change.
kudos out to the education subcommittee and the chair in particular. I mean, they really worked hard and came up with this. I mean, this really thought outside the box on how we can do this. It was when we saw it initially, we were like, wow, this is really.
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Motion carries now. Issue 3, which is primarily on page 333 of your materials. Again, we're waiting for legislation on 3.1, which has to do with when possible we should maintain a complainant's confidentiality. 3.2 is authorizing our staff to dismiss low-level complaints or to give this authority to staff. Again, we wait for the bill. 3.3 is an appraisal issue, not ours. 3.4 has to do with the enforcement committee has brought those. I guess we're going to look at those here in just a few minutes. No, we did that yesterday.
We did it yesterday, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've done all that on 3.4, 3.5, 6, and 7 are the appraisal board. And then we go over to issue 4, and the first one is, again, for legislation. 4.2 is the appraisal board, 4.3 is both, and that's things we've been talking about off and on. Reporting requirements. We've killed that horse, I think.
I think we have one. I think Mark Moore was going to speak to 3.5. Is that right on the non-jurisdictional?
I can.
Quickly.
Just to give you an update, because that one is not completed yet.
Okay.
It is completed. We've adopted SOPs and have a spreadsheet tracking it. On the TREC side, we actually don't get a lot of non-jurisdictional complaints that involve other agencies. On the board side, they actually have a lot. Most of our non-jurisdictional complaints are complaints about like commission disputes, other license holders, complaints against a seller or buyer. So they're real estate related, they're just not areas we have jurisdiction over. So this recommendation had to do with referrals to other agencies. So we'll track it, it probably won't be a lot of information, but we have SOPs in place, we're already in effect on that. And we can provide any further information on it, but I think it's a really small piece of our total caseload.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Sorry, I can't see you. You're going to have to tap me on the shoulder. Okay, and under management action, the first one has to do with the appraisal board, and we have been talking, I believe, about all of these issues for the last day and a half. The budget development policy is for your consideration. Mr. Baker, you wanted to speak, and you never jumped up and down and said, stop, I want to talk.
Madam Chair?
Just a minute. He was a speaker, and I didn't call on him.
Okay.
What do you want to say?
Well, it was about the couple things that we passed up on 2.1 and 2.3.
Okay.
And dealing with the instructor approval authority. And I understand because the commission has already begun to move in that direction even before sunset. And I think an important point that people outside of this room need to understand, most of what the Sunset Commission did, probably 90% of it, we were already doing. They just gave us some timelines and maybe a little prodding and urging. It was already on your plate. I mean, it was already there as you work through it. I mean, this is a good example of going through it. But when they talk about the use of, they're taking away the authority, and we still want to have in there, and the staff's response to the Sunset Commission talked about that we need to have the guidelines and work through it. And we look at the current process we have that for the qualified courses, which we addressed on ESAC, and the elective courses, that people have to have expertise in those subject matters, meet certain requirements, 5 years as a broker, things like that. It's going to be so critical that in all of that, we have that. I mean, that we do have that authority. And I know Jan's very involved with the provider, and we've got a lot of good provider people out there, but it's a different animal than the regulatory. And we need to make sure that they are on board with what we're doing, because this is not just a management thing or an agency thing. These are people out in the world. These are our agents out there doing business that are impacted dramatically. And many of us in the business fight the battle when we have one of our agents come and say, well, this instructor told me this, and we go, oops. And so it's critical in my mind that be there, that we don't let that slip on any level at all. And I'm as a broker out there, I'm looking to all of you to make sure that in fact happens. Do we have a sense that that is where we're going, and we're already going down the road?
It depends what comes out. I mean, in the sunset bill, we have suggested that, we have asked for that. And I will tell you that while we can't specifically lobby, we can give them our suggestions. You as an individual broker and or providers can go lobby. So
Well, and I do.
if it comes out and it's not what you think is good for your agent.
We've got an excellent representative in our area, Jeff Leach, who does an incredible job and is very astute on all these things. We do interact. And I don't know, I guess, this is live streamed and this is recorded on a cat. So I'm an incredible optimist that Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick and Speaker Bond, maybe mispronounce his name, will get this information, and they need to understand that we're already doing all this, that we're doing the work. Sunset Commission going through this. One of the things I would encourage our 3 top people to do, and I know it won't happen this year because they're so busy on all this other stuff, they need to set up a process to evaluate the Sunset Commission. While we not for the question,
The watchers.
not for the purpose of determining if it should exist or not. I mean, its value has been determined, but its process, because we need to make sure that the Sunset Commission's procedures and their agenda doesn't have a lot of predetermined items in it that cause them to move forward. I mean, they've come up with some recommendations that frankly are the work of the legislature, that are policy issues. Shouldn't have been a recommendation. These are not things Sunset Commission have said, to the commission, you need to do these things. Frankly, that was a policy issue that they came predetermined, and that shouldn't be the case. And this has an impact on all of us in the business. And so hopefully our leaders will hear some of that kind of thing, because I watch this incredible diverse group, and it's an amazing thing. And I watch all of you with this common commitment and heart about all of this. And every once in a while, some of you will kind of slip a little bit and fall, and the rest of you kind of pull them back into the mix. And it's a great working situation. And people need to know, the amount of work and what goes into this, and they need to appreciate it. And the concept of the Sunset Commission saying, we're going to show you how you can improve, and that's good. But let's do it in a more efficient manner as we work through that.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me the
Did you have
chance.
something, Mr.
On the national, on the
Yes, sir.
geographic thing,
Yeah.
competency, well, that's one of the things that I hope we will be moving forward to the bill, because that's going to be pretty important.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Yes, sir.
Did we finish already all the written line stuff? Page 334, we just can take 2 seconds down here and look at that.
Which one?
Under the new recommendations, direct the agency to report.
Yep.
I don't think we ever got as far as saying what we as a commission want to look at performance data, except for the 5 minutes to answer a phone call. And don't know whether it's going to do it now or future meetings on how to set a performance amount that we want. We know the governor's going to do one, if he does, but do we have one already? And we can start by, if proper, get the staff to tell us what is the performance level right now that we're trying to meet.
On what?
Okay, it's 2 paragraphs from the bottom on page 334. Direct the agency to report on annual performance.
Follow that stuff?
Yes. In other words, average time to resolve a complaint, what is it right now and what should it be?
It's here, isn't it?
Isn't that what we did just a few minutes ago? It's on agenda item
Did we talk about?
21.
Okay, maybe I missed it.
Yeah,
So-
that was on, that's all these reports. We went through all this stuff.
Okay, so what is it now?
Okay, I wasn't here. Okay.
So what is the average time to resolve a complaint?
275 days. That's the target.
Okay.
And currently, it's 328. Sorry, that's the, so it's year to date, it's 206. The target's 195.
Okay. And is that a good
So-
target? Should we accept that?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. What, I mean,
So if I might, the instructions that we have, that we were, the metric that was used to compare us to others was generally that 180 days. Okay, that's the one, that's why I talked about that. So the target that we're, quote, after is, are we appropriately resourced to get to 180 days? Right, that's the metric that that we recommended as a common standard among licensing agencies.
Okay, average time to issue a license.
So that is data, all of these,
Right.
just all of these we're required to report data, and if you give us a target, okay? So the average date, we talked about this too, this is how many days do we actually have our hands on the data?
Right.
Yeah.
Right now, we can't measure that.
right.
Right now, we can't measure it. So
And if
what
we
I
could
can
measure
tell
it-
you,
And if we could measure it, what would be the?
so here's what I can tell you is the day that we get the last piece of data, the next day the issue's license. The licenses are issued. That really doesn't answer the whole question of how many days did we have our hands on on each piece of the data to process it. That's what we're attempting to measure.
The comments that I get from people who call us is, why does it take so long to get a license? And it's more complicated, so I have to call Mr. Olmix. But we should have something, arms around something that we need to have as a goal.
I get his point, and I think once we have this information now in this new stop-start, whatever procedure, how many days it takes to get a license out by our internal procedures, there should be a goal set.
Right.
And also, just as a general comment, I like Bob's plan of, hey, when it's 10 minutes, the new goal needs to be 5, and then after it's 5, the new goal needs to be 1, and we should be moving the goalposts as we hit goals over time.
And Mr. Uriag, I might say, when somebody says that to you, the first thing you need to say to them is, did you send all your stuff?
I do.
Okay.
Reserve balance is 3 to 4 months, is that right?
I'm sorry?
Reserve balance is 3 to 4 months?
No, this is all reserves. They just want the data of what all the reserves are.
But he's asking for what's the target.
The operation is, for the operations and contingency reserve, the minimum is 30% and the maximum is 40%.
34.
I saw somewhere on one of the reports that 3 to 4 months reserves.
That's what it was before the agency revised it in November.
And what percent is that?
30.
30%. 30 is
Okay.
the bottom
Got
point,
it.
you said.
Hold times, we talked about, we can determine that, but we want it to be no more than 5 minutes, is that correct?
That's right.
Right now.
For now.
We'll report the average.
For now,
right,
until it's
and
one
your
minute.
target is 5 minutes for now.
Got it. And number of percentage of abandoned calls, we cannot track that, we're told, right?
No, we can.
We can, we
have
have
it.
it.
We
We have it
absolutely
in the
do.
report.
It's
14
in there.
minutes?
We'll just report the date, no.
It's a percentage
Percentage.
of calls, and, yeah, we can definitely, I report that on a monthly basis, and that's.
December, it was
We've been getting that.
13.6.
It's in your letter, too.
Do we have a goal that we're shooting for?
I don't know if that one really makes sense to have a goal per se.
I think we talked about that at our exec committee meeting, remember, because lots of people, when they call, they may be walking into a store or an elevator, or we don't know
Or
the
hear
reason
you
they
can go on the
abandoned the
website,
call.
now they go on the website, or they're on their cell phone and they get a text. I mean, there's a million reasons.
I'm happy to do some research and try to find, because I think there is a distinction between that number for because there are industry standards, but I think there's a distinction between that number for public and private, and I'm happy to provide that information to you guys to give you an idea.
I think that'd be good.
And I think there's a direct relationship between that percentage and the all wait time.
Right, that too.
Always says so.
Right.
Any other annual performance measures that we need to be aware of?
So all of these are the 5-year performance data that are required by 472.
Right.
Okay, so this is back under 1.1. Number of full-time equivalent positions at the agency. So that's an annual, will tell you how many FTEs do we have. Number of complaints received from the public. Number of complaints dismissed. So this is all statistics you're already going to see in your monthly reports. Number of enforcement actions by sanction type. We have that disposition report. Number of enforcement cases closed through voluntary compliance. The number of orders. Amount of administrative penalties assessed.
What page are you reading from?
No, it's not a page, sorry. This is we reported the comparison to our 1105 reports, what's requested under 1105 that we're required to give, and what the new requirements are under 472.
Got it.
Most of these are in there, but many of these are, it's 5 years of performance data that we have to give.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to, there's about 10 of them there. I just want to make sure that if you had, if you thought something was missing, or if you wanted to pay attention to one or more, let us know.
Okay.
But number of license holders, average time to resolve complaints, average time to issue a license, that's in there too. Litigation costs and reserve fund balances. So,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Olmixon. Yesterday, we covered agenda items 24 and 25, so that takes us to agenda item 26, discussion of possible action on agency communication to commission members. And there's 2 pages of timelines following that. Those will be on pages 3, 6, and 7.
That actually goes to the next agenda.
That's the next agenda.
27.
Okay, then tell me what your communication proposal is.
20. Okay. Commissioner, so this is just a reminder that we made this commitment to you, and then to make sure if you have any questions about it or concerns that it is in any way incomplete, please let us know and we'll amend it. So in efforts to make sure that you receive all of the information you need to effectively understand what's going on and give us appropriate guidance, I'll just reiterate, you will receive a copy when we post every set of monthly staff reports. Okay? You will, at your quarterly meetings, receive the most recent month and the additional quarterly measures. And then annually, and this is not a policy that you guys have yet adopted, but annually we would recommend a workshop where we do the deep dive on last year over this year and compare some of the national stuff. So you give us guidance either going into strategic planning or going into the legislative session. That was the November request. In addition, per Commissioner Arriaga's, one of his points of emphasis is that as each committee meets, when a committee meeting is set and an agenda is set for that meeting, each and every commissioner will receive notice. You can look at the agenda, and if you have input that you want to provide, you can provide it back to the general counsel. Or you could just send information directly to, I guess, the chair of the committee. Can you do that?
Or maybe more appropriately, the liaison for the commission.
Or
Committee liaison from the commission.
if it's an outside advisory committee, but I'm talking about even the committees, the subcommittees of the commission, like the budget committee. You'll know when the budget committee is going to meet, and you'll see that first draft of the budget. So if you look at it and go, I don't understand that at all, those notes don't make sense to me, pass that along and say, I don't know what you're trying to do there, but make sure you explain it way better than what it says on that particular explanation. So each and every one of those, you'll get notice of the meeting and the agenda. Within 10 days after the end of any of these committee meetings, we'll produce a report. Okay, report and or minutes of that particular meeting, a summary, so that you know what was accomplished. before you get to your regular quarterly meeting. So it's not just, oh my God, here comes one of those big old binders I have to read through over the next 10 days, right? You'll actually be kept up to speed as it goes along. Are there any of the, did I miss anything that you would like? But that was our commitment to make sure that you guys got better communication on what was going on.
Just ma'am.
Just, I know that you have given 10 days now for us to get our reports to study. It's a lot of material. Is there any way we could get it like 12 days prior to our meeting?
Oh,
For us getting the binders?
for the actual meeting, well, and I'll let General Counsel talk about that. There's a variety of reasons when we talk about the full calendar. So 90 days, let's just, use that generically.
Go into we'll talk about that specifically
Okay.
at the next agenda
All right.
item. It will be difficult. We are very tight on time. But,
I got you.
If we ever can get it done 2 days earlier, we will.
And the governor's office now has
Yeah.
their time
And they have
period
a
for
whole
them
week.
to review everything before we get to send it to you as well. That's another whole about 5 or 6 days that was added to the process. So are there any, we're hoping that if you're reading reports from committees as they meet, you'll see it again in your materials, but you'll already have read it
Right. It'll be
ahead of
helpful.
time.
Yes.
Is it possible ever to meet bi-monthly?
That's your call.
Well,
But
we have
I will tell you what, actually, Commissioner Hargit, if you let me go through agenda item 27, you'll
sorry.
understand the timing. And a lot of it has to do with the posting in the register and allowing time for comments and allowing the subcommittees to meet. So why don't I go through that and then I will answer that
Understood.
question.
Thank you.
Okay?
You have a question, Mr.
No, I'm
Wilson? No. Is there any reason for us to do a motion if we just accept what you're doing?
No, this is for
Okay.
discussion and just if you wanted something more.
Does anybody else have another reporting thing you want to get?
The only,
Right, go ahead.
the only question I'd ask is that the minutes and not necessarily the minutes, but the agenda of the executive committee and any action taken by the executive committee or recommendations that are going to come to the board from the executive committee or the commission from the executive committee, I would like to receive that.
You will.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
It's another committee.
Each and
I know,
every
it's just another
advisory
committee.
and committee.
But specifically with the executive committee, I think it's important with that one, not just to receive the agenda, but also any actions that were taken.
Right. And I think on this last meeting was just a couple days ago.
Yep.
So that was an unusual circumstance that.
Okay.
Okay, so
Agenda item
agenda item
27.
27, if you look on page 367 and 369, one is a pictorial representation of the schedule. But I want you to focus on, because this is on the time calculation column. So we start with a commission meeting, and then we have to have an enforcement committee meeting within a certain amount of days if we have a request for a rehearing, because that's statutory. And then we have other committees that meet regular, our education standards, our broker lawyer, our broker responsibility working group, and our inspector committee. If you look on the third paragraph down, it talks about how we actually have about an 8-day window to get all of those committees in, because we have to have 30 days from the times the rules are posted in the register. And even if we get the rules, proposed rules to the register the day after, it takes them about 18 days because if they only post every other week on a Friday. It's just the timing, or a Monday meeting, so we missed that current Friday, so we have to go to the next Friday, or every week on Friday. And then we have to back up from the date of the next commission meeting, which is 90 days, we have to have time for sending out the books. We have to have a week before that to have the governor's office now look at the agenda and what's called a proposed rule memorandum. That's a new directive by the governor's office. And this, by the way, doesn't count all the staff meeting and staff preparation time. This is just committee meetings and requirements that we have with the governor's office. So we really are left with this 8-day windows to get our meeting in. One of the things that we're trying to do, because it's kind of been catch cans when the committees set the meeting, is actually propose that we have set meetings. Like, for instance, ESAC would meet on the second Monday of October, January, April, and July. The inspector committee would meet on the third Monday, so that you, as commission members, would have some advance notice and regular ability to, if you want to be at this meeting, you could schedule in advance. You would know to put it on your calendar and keep that day open. And we thought that may again be a way to get y'all more information. We spoke with a couple of the committees who tend to go for certain types of days and times anyway, and said we'd like to standardize this. No one seemed to have a problem with that. And then, executive committee is as called, and then the budget committee has their own schedule in the budget policy, and that's on the next page in 371. And they have a range, so I just kind of picked the last day of that range and put that on the calendar. So you get a complete idea of meeting materials, but the month that's immediately preceding the commission meeting every time is very, very full, because your committees are getting into the weeds on a lot of the comments and other work that they bring to you in proposals. So I guess what we're asking, if you understand this, first of all, if this is something you would want to do, is recommend that we do institute these set meeting times for the committees. While you're thinking about that, I will answer Commissioner Arriaga's questions about meeting every other month. If we met every other month, we would have to juggle committees you would only hear from a committee every other meeting. The rules would have to be spaced out, because by the time we got the comments in, it would be every other meeting.
Which could be done, right?
It could be done, with a little bit of juggling, but the problem would be is you will be elongating the rulemaking process. Because
Which could be done.
Which could be done, but I'm just saying that's the difference.
Instead of 3 months to propose and implement rules, it would be 6 months, every time.
Well, if they're meeting every other month, it would be 4 months.
Okay, 4 months.
Last question. When did the governor's office start demanding to see our agenda?
This governor.
Yeah, it's Governor Abbott. It's not.
A little over a year ago.
Yeah, and then they came up with the proposed rule memorandum, and we have to give them all of our proposed rules.
All agencies, not just us.
Yeah, it's everybody.
It's everybody.
That was about 6 months ago, I think. Maybe 8.
Carrie?
In the processing of this 3-month calendar, are you collecting things that go to the Texas Register all during the committee meetings and so forth? And do you send all of them all at one time, or do you send them spaced out?
We only send things we post meetings in the Texas Register, but rules are only posted after this body has actually proposed them. Everything else is just drafts and ideas for recommendation to bring forward. This is the only body that can actually propose a rule for this.
We send it to the Texas Register.
Right.
All
Right.
of this stuff.
In this meeting. Okay. Yes, Mr. Arriaga.
The reason for the question is, I really believe that it's very convenient for staff, but very difficult for volunteers unless we have a little bit more thinner bread in the sandwich. And it sounds like we got weedy committees. And I've always been, in a lot of us, on the idea that maybe we should not pass that much regulation. Sometimes less is more. In some way, somehow, I don't know whether it comes from the committees or staff, we come up with recommendations all the time. And half of them, some get us into trouble. And that's why we've alienated some people. So if staff can consider, Ms. Wilmington, less is better sometimes in setting regulations. Thank you.
I think staff should remind the commissioners what rule review is required for this body also, because we do have obligations.
Yes, every 4 years we have to review all of our rules.
So
That's where most of all this
most
stuff
of where all this
comes from.
stuff comes from.
Well, and legislation.
Yeah.
New legislation initiatives and, yeah.
Just a thought for you. At the governor's training that Bob Leonard and I attended, which was extremely good, the governor gave us some rules for not making rules, or when we do make a rule, considerations. Would you all like to have that? I thought maybe I'd pass along to general counsel, and it might be good to pass along to your different committees to look at, because I thought they were great points.
Please share it with the rest of us, too.
Okay. I'll give it to you. Would you send it out? Because, I want to make sure it's done correctly. And then, I don't know if it's appropriate now, but I really came in, and I think Jan did as well, and I don't know about Mike, but coming in as a newbie, I guarantee you don't have a clue what's going on, and so you just kind of walk in and you're trying to do the right thing. A mentorship program of some type, if I would like to maybe suggest that, if it would be appropriate. The other thing would be to, when you do the orientation, take the time to go through an entire meeting, maybe with the newbies, and let them see really what transpires and what different items that they need to be aware of and how to study it. Might be good. Just some points.
The other thing I just want to say, now that we are getting the notes from the committee meetings,
that helps tremendously.
I feel like I know a lot more this month than I knew
absolutely
2 months ago. And I think that will help, and if we get in the habit of it.
And Tony's, your report has helped me a lot,
Me
just
too.
seeing that.
Agree with that. I think a mentorship idea is a good idea, and I also have been making some notes on how to improve.
We've done that
orientation.
informally a little bit.
And I would offer, even after I'm gone, everybody's got my cell phone number, and
That
please
brings up
call
another
me.
thing. We have treasurers in these past chairs. And do we utilize them at all? Do we have an advisory, maybe once a year session with them for input? There's still a lot of them involved in the industry, and I'm sure Avis will be around for a long time. So.
Selling motorhomes. Yeah, she's gonna do motorhome. That's her new gig, selling mobile homes.
that's it. New gig. If I pass my fingerprints.
That's right.
Yeah, me too. You know what, Avis, mine was skinny. They had a hard time getting my prints.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
one of the things that Commissioner Wilkinson suggested is something that we actually put on our support to new commissioners kind of checklist. Somebody asked, I think it was just yesterday, said dress rehearsal. I guess I missed the dress rehearsal. Well, we actually do dress rehearsal for meetings with the staff ahead of time to make sure that we know who's presenting and do we have all the materials and all that. So and none of that's on your calendar, right? But one of the things that we thought which would be really helpful, and it's exactly what you just suggested, is when we get a new class is to bring them in for a day.
Right.
To do a
I would do
day-long
that.
orientation that includes a dress rehearsal of a meeting. This
Exactly.
is what a meeting looks like, and ask all the questions you could possibly want.
Good idea.
Send them the minutes from the one before or something, or not the minutes, the whole thing.
I would actually look for us
It's a
to
very
have
good
a
idea.
motion to, if we think we should, approve suggesting that the committees follow a particular schedule rather than being random, which is
I agree.
what Carrie is proposing. I guess this
I
motion.
so move.
It's right here on 365, you got a little more work. Move that you accept the staff's recommendation.
I move that the commission approve the staff's recommendation
Have a
to
second?
adopt the set of scheduled meeting dates for advisory committees as presented.
Have a second? Okay.
I'd like to add something else if I can, to the
Okay.
motion. Also to explore the possibility of having bi-monthly meetings at some point in time. We might have to change some regulations and et cetera, but if we start looking at it, maybe it might
That would be
happen.
the decision of this body. I mean, that's totally up to this body.
Well, someone has to look at it, it's possible.
I'll second the exploration.
Let's deal with the.
You want to have two motions?
Let's have two motions.
Okay.
So let's deal with the.
Well, I move to
The
amend the
committee-
motion by adding that we explore into the amend the motion that we explore looking at bi-monthly meetings.
Do you accept that?
I do.
Okay.
Well, before I accept it, to Ms. Stevens' comment earlier about, long meetings like this, would that decrease the amount of time of these meetings?
Not necessarily.
Probably not.
Not necessarily.
You said not necessarily, you said
Well,
yes.
there probably wouldn't be 2-day meetings.
That's what I meant.
Right.
Okay.
This is the first 2-day meeting we've had in my
Yeah.
6 years.
So we wouldn't
Yeah.
do that.
In my mind,
Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah,
There you go.
okay.
We used to have them more often, and they were not less long.
The theory of meetings is you fill up the time allotted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Believe me,
That's
I know.
really, the main thing is information and communication and digesting what needs to be done. That's the biggest hurdle in any organization.
That's correct. Okay, so we have a motion and a second on any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Well, you need
Aye.
to vote on the amendment, right?
Oh, we vote on the amendment, yes. So to add the possibility or the exploration of a bi-monthly meeting, or every other month, I guess.
I second.
Yes, you did. On that amendment, all in favor of that amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Then the main motion, which is to accept this timeline with the exploration of the shorter timeframe. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Thanks, Ms. Eby. So now, moving right along, agenda item 28.
This is discussion and possible action regarding the role of the commission committee liaisons. That's just a question that we had, and it's just for a discussion item, so that all of the members, which is really appropriate since you just made some new appointments, what the role is.
My recommendation was that we rotate them. That way, we can spend 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, however, in enforcement, and another 2 years, 3 years in budget, if that works.
Yeah.
Because if not, you're in a little cubicle, and it's hard to understand the big picture.
And that's agenda item 29, so you can open them both up.
Yeah, okay. In terms of liaison, we're only talking about inspector, ASAC, and A&M? Is that a liaison?
Broker responsibility.
Broker responsibility. Oh, I didn't put anybody on that. You didn't have that on the agenda. Okay, fine. Okay. I'll have to think about that.
Well, they're not a standing committee, so maybe that's why we don't do it.
they're ad hoc,
They're ad hoc.
as needed.
And even rotating standing committees, if it's possible.
Well, that committees are, she's saying, are agenda item 29, so we're specifically talking only about liaisons.
But we could add some more committees, right? Standing committees also, if so wishes.
Volunteer responsibility.
That's a good one.
Volunteer.
Good luck.
I've just appointed Jan to broker responsibility.
That's a good one.
I move, is it proper to make a motion? Page 26, where is it?
Well, I think what's on the agenda is first to discuss the role, and then you're talking about the rotation, if you will. So does I mean, I don't believe it's codified.
I mean, what's the role of the liaison? It's to report back and
Yeah, it's-
explain what's going on.
It's to attend the meeting and bring back the information to the commission. That's what always.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's the-
and I think
by
also it
definition.
could be if the commission has a directive for that committee, it's to express that directive.
Right.
Two-way street.
Does
Yeah,
everybody
it's two-way street.
understand that as the role of the liaison? Okay.
Yeah, and that needs to be communicated also to the committee itself, that there is a liaison and what the role is.
All right.
Okay, so now, let's take up your suggestion that we rotate that.
Okay, so is that,
And I will tell you that in these appointments, I did, in some way or another, communicate with every one of you and ask your preference. And so more than one of you chose to stay where you were because you felt like you hadn't been there long enough to really figure out what was going on.
That's exactly right.
And so a one-year rotation, particularly for a brand-new appointee, is probably
does somebody, it
inappropriate.
could be 2 years, 3 years, just look into doing that.
The other thing, the
Right.
committee itself, they need to know who you are and to feel comfortable in sharing what they need to share. So.
I would also add, I mean, we all have unique gifts and talents, and some of us are better suited for certain roles as opposed to
Absolutely.
others.
So if we wanted to change, we could hit on you, right? Hit
You
on
just
the
need-
new chair, wherever
You
it
just
is.
tell whoever the chair is, when the time comes, that you You know, I'm with broker responsibility, but I'm more than willing to be on it, to be ESAC.
Or get me off.
Or get me off of this, I hate it. You know, whatever. Yeah.
Ready for a motion? Or do
I'll
we
take a
need
motion, or
I move we direct staff to consider, this makes sense. There's no motion on this one.
It's not a staff,
Yeah, right.
it's
Not
the
a staff
chair
thing.
of the commission makes the appointments to the committees.
I move that the chair and the commission consider rotating committee liaisons and standing committee members at necessary.
which we already do.
We haven't in the past, so just to make sure that it continues.
We have made that available.
I mean, I'm moving from budget to enforcement this time.
Right, and I'm moving from enforcement to budget.
Yeah.
At my request.
Yeah.
So it's being done.
There's a motion, and there's no second, it's gonna die.
Haven't gotten one, so I believe it's going to die. Okay, so now, on committees, kind of the same thing. Each committee has its own charge, and if you're serving on that committee, I expect you know what your charge is. And go ahead, what were you going to say?
I didn't know if the committee appointments are the only people that are appointed commission members? Or does the commission appoint people like Bob Baker to chair those and?
The chair appoints committee members.
And the
members.
And the committee members, like in the budget committee, they pick their own chair. The enforcement committee picks its own chair. I don't.
Broker lawyers appointed by the governor.
Yeah, the broker lawyer is a different animal, it's a statutory.
Statutory. We select the broker members.
Right.
And as you recall, we have, over the last several times, we've done that, going back to when Chairman Ekstrom who put this in place. We generally appoint, the chairman appoints 2 or 3 people, or a couple of people from the commission, usually other broker members, maybe a public member, to review resumes and interview candidates for broker lawyer. Because back in the day, when I was appointed on it, it was a popularity contest. And I happened to be sitting in the room, so I won. But but it's no, we quit doing that. We started looking for people. Yeah.
Can you just tell us real quick, forgive my ignorance, which committees do we, or which committees does the chair of the commission appoint?
Enforcement and budget, and we used to do, for a short period of time, long-term facilities. But just enforcement and budget, that's all there is.
Okay.
But also
broker responsibility.
Just a moment.
Advisors, yeah.
Do we have any formal policy, or is this just at the chair's discretion and pleasure?
I think, as far as I know, it's a chair's
Okay.
discretion.
So what are we discussing right now? Coming up with a formal policy?
It says discussion of possible action regarding commission, committee appointments, and the frequency of committee meetings.
Okay.
Which we covered in 27.
I don't think we need to make any changes to appointments, do you?
Could we move that each of the committees, you serve at least two years? Could we do that? Just like I know in our case, in my case, when you and I spoke, I said, I'm just getting an understanding of it, so.
That's the will of this group.
You know, we're already kind of flexible
Madam.
about that.
I mean,
Yeah, it's flexible, but.
I was on budget for 5 years.
Yeah. But they ask you every year.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's to my point.
Where do you wanna be?
Why not have a minimum of 2
where do you
years so
wish
you
to
don't have to
serve?
ask every year?
I mean, yeah.
One of the weaknesses I see in education, for example, I really feel like the chair of a committee needs to, when their term ends, that we might consider having them serve as a past chair, like you do in a lot of organizations. I saw a real void, hopefully with Rob Cook coming in as chair. He'll be very good, but with the excellent performance of the chair was there, it would have been great to have had her as past chair. What's that?
He said, let's do that for the commission.
No.
Keep it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a.
Let's move on.
Let's move on, okay.
Yeah.
Then we're on the,
And that is something maybe you can consider at your workshop next year. You know,
I think that's a
all
good
this
idea.
restructuring.
I think so.
Yeah, because it needs to happen.
So, the memorandum of understanding with the appraisal licensing and certification board.
So, Madam Chair, members, this is in here for a couple of reasons. One is that we anticipated, well, we knew that when the board made its decision about abandoning the pursuit of a building, then paragraph 4F needs to be edited out of the MOU. And so that was the only known reason, but one of the things that I think is, the MOU is subject to amendment as requested, as needed. And it has changed from time to time. At least once every 2 years, it needs to be renewed. And so you'll see this particular one, it remains in effect through the end of fiscal year 2019, which means it will come up again for renewal September 1 of 2019. Okay, and so we wanted you to have the opportunity to ask any questions about what's contained in it. Certainly, it needs to be, the board has already directed us to notify you that they want paragraph F deleted. And then any other items that you wanted to bring up, either for our discussion or communication back to them, those kinds of things. So that's all I needed to report.
At the executive committee meeting, we voted on this already, but I wanted to go back to what I voted for. And my main concern has been since sunset is how much time is staff spending doing other stuff, and are we getting reimbursed? And as you can see, it's pretty standard, 10% for certain people, and it goes down. So I wanted to know in dollars and time, in are we budgeting some? And my revelation was that apparently the appraisal board does not reimburse us for the entire cost of them being here and us supervising them. They got 14.5 staff members. We oversee them, but they do not reimburse us anything for the call center. So I think we talked about, and you're going to be looking at the numbers, or did I dream that up? That's what makes it. How much does it actually cost us to have the appraisal board with us? And how much time does it take from our staff, especially leadership or management? And what can we do about that?
Sure. So the Exhibit A of the MOU, page 380, those are estimates of actual time. Okay, estimates of actual time, 10% of the commissioner's time, 10% of the deputy commissioner's time. Before there was a deputy commissioner, it was 20% of the commissioner's time. And that really is an estimate, pretty accurate, I think, of the amount of time that we were spending on it. And then other personnel that have shared responsibilities. Now, the majority of the personnel are 100%. There's one partial in education. Sorry, that's not 100%. Two in one and a fraction in licensing, and then all of their 10 folks that are in enforcement, they pay 100% for. Okay? They also pay, as you can see under paragraph 4C, their reimbursable amount for all of those items, those 12 items that are there. And so we spend some time allocating between cost centers for each of those items. And that is included in their budget. They raise their own revenue from their own fees, and they pay for those services. I think what Commissioner Arriaga is the primary concern is that there are, if you look at paragraph 4A, it says TREC will provide at no cost to the board administrative services and support services, including HR, budgeting, purchasing, contracting, mailroom, payroll, facilities management, call center, I'll talk about that again in a minute. Technology support, not technology itself. Agency personnel training programs, if we have staff training for everybody, we don't have to figure out, well, okay, we'll divide that by the number of persons, that kind of thing. Use of meeting rooms, we don't charge them for that because they pay a portion of the rent. So under the allocable expenses, they pay directly for all of their own technology of a computer on a person's desk. If that person is 100% a board employee, then they bought that 100%. The phone that sits on that desk. But the software to run it, unless it's unique to the board, it's part of technological support. One thing that I will say that the board asked us to look at, they directed a reprogramming of the call center system to add an option that allows us to track all the board calls separately. So they'll pay for that. And then once we do that, once we're able to do that, then if we calculate all that and it's the equivalent of 3/4 of a person, then they'll come back and say, you know what, we need to pay for that. If it's 20% of one person, it may not be worthwhile doing the transfers, the tracking and transfers. Okay. So that's that was their directive to us. We said, okay, so we'll do that. We'll reprogram that and we'll track it over the next 90 days, and then we'll bring it back to you guys and say, okay, here's what it looks like, and then their budget committee can make a recommendation to their full board. You know what, we need to build in money to pay for that half a person, or that 3/4 person, or that full person, whatever it turns out to be.
So it's not costing us much?
I'm sorry?
It's not costing us much? Can you put a dollar price on it?
Today?
Right.
Yeah, today it's unknown, other than it was 5% of the number of calls that came in. But the interesting thing, and I just, generally their rules are actually more complicated than some of the TREC rules. And so sometimes it takes longer. Each one of those calls lasts a little bit longer. Right now, that's all anecdotal. This reprogramming will allow us to put data and metrics behind that.
Commissioner Westcott.
Yeah, I mean, I think bottom line, we want that 5%. Yeah, I mean, or whatever that pro rata usage of the call center is and the call center resources. I mean, that's something we want. And when I look at the whole MOU, and go through, section 4, kind of 1 through 7 here, I really don't have any problem with anything sort of except for, number 2. I mean, that's, number 2 is reception and communication with their licensees, the people that, they're dealing with. That is the core function, right, of both us and them. And so they ought to be, if we're performing that function for them, we need to be compensated for that.
And there was a time, way back in the beginning, when this was all consolidated after the 2007 sunset review. They used to have their own. The line came in that 3001, and it just rang at a receptionist in their department. Okay, different building.
And they actually thought about having
their department
call center because they were having problems also. So just look into the numbers and see what it would take as soon as
So I understand directly. When we merged all that, we lost the ability to track other than generally.
Yeah, which I'm
now
glad
we're going to get back.
I'm glad we're getting it back, and I believe in economies of scale.
Yeah.
I think it's better for us to stay together than as opposed to not. However, if we're providing a service that is a core function of theirs, we need to be compensated for that.
It's fascinating. They pay 3 times more than we pay to get a license.
Yeah.
A lot fewer people.
And I have 6,000 license holders, so
it's
tough.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
You want a motion, or
No.
is that understood?
No need.
Well, we're gonna bring back to you both of them. So their initiative to remove paragraph 4F. So we'll bring that back to you at your May meeting.
Just to be clear, when this comes back, I want something clear in here saying that we are being reimbursed for call center, reception, communication services, anything that we are providing on a customer service basis for them. That's what I would like to see.
So-
So that's what we requested before, and I want to make sure that you all understand what it was. So I think that, I thought we decided that that was going to happen. They wanted to make sure that the commission understood that we were subsidizing someone, which is not going to happen anymore.
So just to be clear, I just want to make sure, we're going to, as soon as we can provide that data to you, we will provide that data to you with a recommendation and their recommendation, and, you know, it may be, as you suggest, they may say, 20%, we don't need to pay for that, and you may say, no, 20%, you're going to pay for that.
Yeah, no,
Right,
I
okay.
think that's
But we'll
clearly
bring
my
you-
position.
We'll bring you the data, and then you guys can make the call.
I don't care if it's 1%, you know, I mean, I don't. It matters.
So if that's the will of the body, I can certainly report that back. That's the direction that they're headed, they wanted the data as well. And they're willing to pay if it makes a difference.
Do you want a motion to make it will of the body, or is it understood?
I think it needs a motion of some kind. Because obviously Commissioner Westcott feels very strongly about it, but I haven't heard from anyone else.
Here's the motion I would propose, and this may go too far, but I would propose that in this draft memorandum of understanding between TREC and TALCB, we move reception and communication services from 4A to C, section C, to make it item 13 of section C.
Second.
And we'll take the next step on that, I think, works together with it, and you haven't voted it yet, but this is part of it, is once we identify what that percentage of a person is, it goes in Exhibit A.
That's fine.
That's right.
Okay, any other discussion? All in
Second.
favor- I got a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 31, discussion of possible action regarding the agency participation in the organization Morello.
So I have just one recommendation that I'd like to make. I wanted to explain the current policy, and so that you guys can have a fruitful discussion. One recommendation. So the current policy is this, that the agency, the state agency is a full dues-paying member of the Association of Real Estate Licensed Law Officials. Included in the budget and travel policies are authorizations for the executive director to be, well, first of all, the chair of the commission is the voting member of that organization, okay? If the chair is present, okay? The chair is by right authorized to attend any of the meetings of that organization. Typically, there are two every year, a mid-year meeting and an annual meeting. And the chair is also authorized to, if the chair is not able to attend, to send a substitute, okay, from among the commissioners. In addition, from the staff, well, there's one more thing. If any other commissioner wishes to attend, then the directive in the policy is today for the person to ask the chair, then the chair to direct the executive director to determine whether we have enough money to do that, and then make that decision and allow someone to go. Either as a substitute or as an additional person. On the staff side, oh, I'm sorry, one other thing on the commission side, is there is in conjunction with the annual meeting, there is something called Commissioner College. And it is a one-day additional day, it's an additional expense to attend it, but it is a very robust discussion of the policy-making duties, pluses and minuses, limitations and authorities, all that kind of stuff for commission members of boards and commissions. And I know Commissioner Leonard has attended that, Commissioner Arriaga has attended that, certainly the chair and other vice chairs in the past, chairs and vice chairs have attended that. So the one recommendation that I think we would make is that is that that is an opportunity that actually benefits the commission significantly. And so, and I apologize, also Commissioner Mellon attended Commissioner College in St. Louis recently. So one of the suggestions was that every commissioner be given the opportunity to attend Commissioner College once before by the third year of their appointment. In other words, you can't do everybody every year, and that kind of doesn't make sense, but as new class members come in, that at least by the third year of your appointment, you have had the opportunity to go and experience Commissioner College. That still gives you at least half of your appointment left to implement lessons learned and networking and all of that other kind of stuff. That's one suggestion to add to the policy.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Good policy, and I'm not concerned about the commissioners
That's
going.
good.
It's the fact you need to attend at least once. I've been it 4 times, twice on my own expense, but twice in 12 years, and it's good. But once you see it, it's good. I'm more concerned and jealous about staff time. I do not, I really believe all hands should be on deck at all times, and it's okay to miss a committee meeting once in a while. So I want you to consider the cutting back on staff time, going to meetings that are not directly, until sunset gets set anyway. So that's my comment there.
So let me address the staff side, if I will. What is currently in the policy is that the executive director is also authorized to attend, and/or if not able to attend, to designate someone else to go in their stead
Can
to those meetings.
Can policy be changed?
Oh, absolutely.
That's what we're talking
No,
about.
that's
That's what we're
that's
learning,
what we're
what we
talking
do
about.
now.
And remind me, I'm sorry, you may have already said this, but how many of these meetings are there?
Two a year.
The mid-year and an annual.
And are they generally within the continental United States?
They are, generally.
Only once.
Once was in Hawaii,
I went to
and
Hawaii.
once was in Alaska.
Jesus.
And once was in Nova Scotia. Sorry, and once was in Vancouver.
Because it's an
Which 4
international,
people
Sorry,
went
it's
to.
yeah,
North America.
it's North America.
Yeah.
I think we.
Can I see the calendar? I want to pick and choose.
Here, here.
Well, that's the I
really
say the
good.
beauty of it. The beauty of it
Understand, but I
is
don't
that
think
if
we
you
go to
looked at,
Hawaii.
it probably could tell you
Go to
a
Alaska.
couple of years out. And if you wanted to say, I want to go to Commissioner College, well, the next two, one is in Peoria and one is in
I think the
Atlanta. I want to go
policy
to
should say
Atlanta.
continental
You
United
know,
States.
decide that.
Can we have a list of all the people that attended the last 3 years and then decide this later on?
And I would just like to add that I would like to add part of the policy be that it's limited to the continental United States. I mean, I don't think people should be going to meetings in Hawaii or Alaska or
Well, and you can
outside the
certainly,
United
any
States.
commissioner can certainly go to this on their own ticket.
No, I'm saying, but no state fund should be
Okay.
used to send people to Hawaii.
Well, for
That's just
example,
my
I've been
opinion.
to
Nothing against Hawaii, but
two
it's just-
meetings, I guess, and I'll be going to one in DC because I'll be there anyway with an AR. You'll be there, so.
That, just so you know, in conjunction with the National Association of Realtors meetings, there's always an Arello update. And any commissioner who happens to be at a National Association of Realtors meeting can go to
Very
those
good.
meetings.
But
So
no funds are used.
there's no fund,
No, I understand.
there's no funds for that at all.
Yeah, no, I understand,
I'm
but
there anyway. and
I get that. I'm referring to, anybody, look, it's a free country, you can go where you want.
Right.
I'm only talking about our money. It should not be used to send people
I want
to
to be
Hawaii.
clear when you said how many meetings we've trying.
The other thing is that the commercial commissioner college is only one time a year, right?
At the annual meeting, not
They
at
are,
the mid-year.
they are, when I was there, they were proposing to put it as an online course.
Right.
Good.
And
Oh,
if
I
they
wish they
do
would.
put it as an online course, I recommend
Yeah, you
that
take- We all
the
should go through it.
commissioners do it the first year that they are in.
Right.
Because it would help a whole lot of policy making and so forth after that,
Oh.
for their entire
Agree.
time, rather
This-
than just the last 3 years.
This is just more information. It has really no
Yeah.
relevance, but for the last year and a half, I have asked someone else to go in my place because I knew I wasn't going to be here.
Yeah.
So I wanted new people to see it, learn it, and get it.
I've never gone, 'cause I frankly just don't have the time, but, again.
Sorry, I only asked broker members.
Yeah.
important because you guys have the same problem as we do in dictating policies.
Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so you got some good ideas and some more information I think is needed before you make a decision.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's table this one.
We will,
We'll keep it-
want us to write up a recommendation and bring you the backup information as well? In other words,
And
take
3
the
years-
travel policy and
And 3
fix it?
years of attendance for AROA meetings.
Happily.
Okay, so we're gonna go to agenda item 32. We by now all
Oh,
know
Lordy.
that the general counsel has expressed her desire to no longer do this.
Is it proper to ask where you're going to go?
Home?
She's retired.
Retired, like not?
I'll do something else, but,
One thing you do know is you're getting away from here, right?
retiring from state service, how's that?
Our last general counsel is not working for one of the vendors, right?
Sometimes, yeah, she does some work for one of the educators.
So,
I got a question on this one.
okay,
Okay, I think it's pretty well set and have you chosen the people that are going to be assisting you?
that's what I was getting ready to say.
Well, it's not my choice, it's a request of this commission. I know 2 people who have raised their hand and volunteered, but I'll let the chair talk about that.
So what we thought perhaps should happen is that we should have some commission input on this hire, even though it's not necessarily required by anything. Mr. Olmixon is empowered to make these kind of hires without any input. However, we felt like that input from people who are going to still be here would be good. And TJ and Jan have raised their hand and said, I'd really like to do that if you'll let me do that.
Great.
And so if y'all are good with that, then I would seek the motion that's here at the bottom of page 381.
And I would suggest that the chair, if possible, too.
I'm not going to.
No,
Vice-
apparently.
Vice chair.
Vice
Not
chair.
gonna be.
Okay, so I'd look for that motion if somebody's going to make, you probably don't want, what?
Do you want to be part of it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else?
No, you're getting close to.
All right.
No.
All right. That'd be too many. So it's just those 3. Okay. Move the commission appoint Commissioner Leonard, Commissioner Turner, and Commissioner. Sorry, you were talking. So Commissioner Miller to participate in candidate selection for the position of general counsel of the agency.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I got a comment. At what point in time are you going to do evaluation of our staff?
That comes on real soon, somewhere along the way.
Evaluation of the executive director?
Yes, ma'am.
We start that process usually in March. We send out the questionnaires, y'all send it back, and then the formal evaluation is done in May.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Is that done by the executive committee?
No.
Well, the full commission, the
Yes.
executive committee
Yes, I will.
reviews it in probably more detail, but the full commission makes any decisions, and it's reviewed in executive session because it's a personnel matter, and then you have to, in open session, if there's going to be any adjustments to salary or anything, you do that in open meeting. Otherwise, the discussion is in closed meeting.
Madam Chair, can I just address that real quickly?
Real quickly.
Okay, real quickly. So, and then we'd have travel reimbursement policy. So I wanted to say 2 things.
We did that
One is-
yesterday,
We did it
Mr. Olmixon.
Did you?
Yes.
Wonderful.
We're good.
Wonderful.
Priscilla did.
Fabulous, fabulous. Okay, well then I don't need to be standing up there. So I just want to say 2 things about that. One is I'm always look for feedback on my performance and working on the management of the agency. I've always been gratified with the level of input that I receive back. One of the things that I would encourage you to do, and I wanted to let you know this, I shared this with a couple of members already, is that I would ask you not to recommend any salary adjustments that are not performance-based. In other words, you set a target, you hit the target, then there's a salary adjustment. If we don't hit the target, there's no salary adjustment. I think that is commensurate with what, and it's just for me, not for anyone else. It's commensurate with the level of concern and commitment that we have for making sure that the performance of this agency meets all of the expectations of our policy.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Madam Chair, can we go back 1 second? Do we have a calendar for the search for general counsel? Do we know what's next?
Yes, thank you. So I will send to each of the committee members the draft of the posting and ask you to turn it around very quickly if you have any issues with it. We've done some internal as well, and Commissioner Turner gave us a first look at it as well, or because he works in the field as a lawyer, gave us some input. And so we made some corrections to it. I'll send that out to you. I'll ask you to turn it around very quickly. We'd like to get it posted by Friday.
And we'll
Okay?
see it. Everybody's going to see it, right?
It wants to be posted by Friday. Did you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I can send it to everyone, that's fine.
I'd like to see it.
Send all the recommendations back to me. By Friday morning, we'd like to get it posted if we can, ready to go by.
I think that's a good idea to send it to everyone.
Okay. By Friday afternoon, and then as soon as we start getting qualified candidates, we will set up a screening process and interview schedule. The objective is to hire as soon as reasonably possible of the qualified person, so that we maximize the amount of time that person has dealing with Carrie for knowledge transfer prior to the May meetings, okay, between now and then.
Just need to upload your whole brain.
We meant to do that as quickly as possible.
Those used to be unmailed.
Yeah, Vulcan mind.
Agenda item 34 is discussion of possible action regarding any future agenda items. Does anyone have a future agenda item other than those we've already discussed and made note of over the last several hours, yesterday and today?
I'd like to discuss, if everybody wishes, roles of the executive committee, or a job description. I don't think I ever saw one. Or maybe you ought to make one.
I think that General Counsel sent us what's out of Robert's Rules of Order and something else a while ago.
And we can add to it or take away from it.
Anything else?
It's been a couple years, I think, since we did that update on kind of trends, Doug, different things occurring in the marketplace, so to speak. I think it might be a good time for us to chat about that again.
Okay.
Disruptive technologies, that kind of thing.
Yep. Okay. Anything else?
I have one, if that's okay. One of the things we'd like to suggest, and we've worked on it and the board adopted a policy like this, is to make routine, when a rule is adopted, that it's also delegated to the staff. The staff's authorized to implement the change to forms, rather than have to wait and bring you back forms another meeting later.
That's silly.
That we actually, just as a routine administrative, if we need to make a non-substantive change or a change that implements a law, or rule change, you specifically authorize us in conjunction with the rules to update the form.
I have one also.
Oh, okay.
And I think it's timely because we're potentially about to have some new members. There's been some discussion about ideas for new member orientation, maybe having that be a day long, what should be included in that. I would appreciate at our next meeting if you guys could put together a new member orientation, at least schedule sort of agenda, and we can give you maybe some input back. It's been a while since I attended, and I'm not sure I've attended under Governor Abbott, the governor's training program. So commissioners that have, I would appreciate you sharing with staff what was covered at that orientation, so that we're not
the whole thing.
so that we're not overlap, or if there are places where we need to overlap. But I think that I'd like to see that, because I do think it's important that we make sure that we're giving people enough information to be valuable members, as valuable as they can be from the outset. And that may include really simple stuff like a refresher on Robert's Rules and that sort of thing. So.
Awesome. Does everybody have May the 6th at 10 a.m. on their calendar? It looks like the next meeting scheduled after that is August the 12th. Does that work for most people?
Let me check.
And then if you're, I know you haven't made this decision, but probably a good lead time. If you do decide to adopt a policy
I had to go to the governor's
for our
office to
annual
make sure I
workshop,
could bring this.
then we need to schedule that
So it's the whole
too.
thing.
So a recommendation on that would be, or a decision on that would be
Okay,
helpful.
so.
What was the August date?
The August date's the 12th. Currently have,
If I'm still around.
yeah, me too. The November date for the commission meeting is the 12th of November. That's proposed on the calendar, which is on page 385, which is the second to the last page in this agenda. And
that's a Tuesday, not a Monday, because the Monday is a state holiday.
State holiday.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Veterans Day.
And just checking when NAR is. The National Association of Realtors meeting ends the day before.
Yeah, I started saying, I think we get home
Ends the day before, so if you were going to look at having your workshop, it would be somewhat more logical to do it on the 13th for any of your broker members who might be at the NAR conference in San Francisco.
Yeah, San Francisco.
We can tentatively pencil that in until you guys make
I'm
a
not
determination.
But you can.
I think you'd be perfect for the trainer for that one.
Short timer over
Yeah.
here.
No, I've seen her at us. Okay, anything else?
She'll be at the wine country, I know.
That's right. We're adjourned.
Thank you all.
Yes, sir.